Eli Goldfine, a 14-year-old prodigy rapidly becoming an authoritative voice within the prediction market space.
I would just say the edge I have over other 14-year-olds is that
You're going to go toe-to-toe with some of the smartest guests we've ever had.
Okay, I think you're contradicting yourself here.
Bro.
With your 50% P-Doom, I just don't see how you can really form a prior here.
Well, I mean, not being able to form a prior, you could say that about anything, right?
What do you mean you could say that about anything? There's just no remote reference class here to be able to form a base rate from it.
One of the dominant things going on in my head is this sense of bigness. Like, this is a world-changing event.
I'm trying to think about how to put my disagreement here.
You said that ASI won't be a world-changing event? Do you really think that?
What my gut feeling is here is like, that sounds right, but on the other hand, no one has any idea what's going to happen.
Welcome to Doom Debates. Today I'm talking with Eli Goldfine, a 14-year-old prodigy who's rapidly becoming an authoritative voice within the prediction market space. His new podcast, The Supercycle, features a recent interview with Hanson.
Let's get this started here. So, what's your P-Doom?
I think human extinction is unlikely.
And is currently preparing to host an exclusive interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. Eli is a lifelong amateur astronomer who's currently building software to coordinate a decentralized network of telescopes. In the last couple years, that is to say ages 13 through 14, he's been diving into a cluster of ideas that include prediction markets, macroeconomics, AI, and of course, existential risk from artificial superintelligence. So today, I'm excited to see what Eli thinks about the various stops on the AI doom train and ask him about the odds that humanity will survive long enough to enable him to start as a high school freshman in the fall. Eli Goldfine, welcome to Doom Debates.
Thank you, Liron. Happy to be here.
So I think we've made the point pretty clear that you are unusually young. And for people who didn't get that from my introduction, I encourage them to come watch the video. And you do in fact look quite young, which is great. You know, you look youthful, but it is like very shocking because I think people are going to see that you're going to go toe to toe intellectually with some of the smartest guests we've ever had, and you're only 14 years old. So like, what's the deal? How come you're 14 years old going on 24?
Okay, so first of all, I mean, I know you've had some extremely smart people on the show, not to say the least of them. We're talking Hanson, many others, very smart people, who have debated you on existential risk, and so I would say I'm definitely not as smart as Hanson, who is a very, very smart man who has some pretty strange ideas. I wouldn't say I'm like a genius, or I wouldn't even say I'm a prodigy or anything. I would just say like the edge I have over maybe say other 14-year-olds is that I'm interested in something just for the sake of being interested in it, rather than trying to get something out of it. Because when I look at my classmates, either they're interested in something that, doesn't really matter, like they're interested in sports or video games or, something that 14-year-olds would normally be interested in, or maybe they're interested in something more interesting, but they're doing it for a reason, like to get an internship or to get into a good college or a wide variety of reasons. So what I would say is that, I've just really enjoyed diving into the topics that I'm interested in, and I feel like I have enough dedication and being genuinely interested in them to be able to learn all of what I know about these different topics. And maybe that's just because not everyone is an ASPE like Liron and I are, but I don't know. That's what I would say in general.
I think that's pretty self-aware. I talked with you for a couple hours prior to this show, and we've been DMing in Discord for a few months. As best as I can tell, if I had to say, how are you so special in terms of your prodigyness or just like, being way younger than most people who are in this conversation, I guess I agree with your assessment that it's like maybe there's not one single dimension, right? Like if you showed up at a math contest right now, sure, you do way better than like the average middle school student or the average high school student, but you wouldn't be like winning the statewide math contest, right? You're not quite top on that dimension. It seems like your superpower is that you have like an adult level of agency and somehow like just a mature approach to like pursuing goals, like adult goals, right? So it sounds like you've somehow gotten adult level at those particular qualities.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. This is like something that I think like Twitter is good for. With social media, I mean there are some downsides, but there's a lot of benefits. One thing that I think happened with me being on Twitter is I see like, okay, so here's all of these people and they're doing interesting things in the real world. So like why should I be limited? Because I'm interested in the same things they're in. That's why it's showing up in my feed. Why should I not be allowed to do those things because I've been around on Earth for less long than they have? And so I guess the advice they give is you can just build things. So that's kind of like my philosophy as well. Like why not just try to do it, you know?
Now, prior to you, I think the youngest Dune Debates guest has been Matthew Adelstein, also known as Bentham's Bulldog. He's been a rising star also in the intellectual community. I think he's currently 22 years old. I know you're familiar with him as well. I'm sure you must be thinking, man, why is that guy so old?
Oh, I mean, he's very smart. We just had him on the Supercycle, so that episode should be coming out in 2 weeks. I have always been confused why there's not like more people like me. Like the closest thing I could think of is like I don't know if you know like Zach Yadagari or like that sort of group.
No.
They're like the teenage vibe coders who code like slop, and then they're on Twitter being like, "I'm a teenager and I just vibe coded an app," and it was like, "Hey, you're killing it." And so I guess that's what I would say it's the closest. But like I feel like it's kind of weird that there's not a lot more people doing what I'm doing on like Twitter and stuff that I can tell.
Yeah, do you know anybody in real life, like at your school or in meet space, who is kind of comparable to you in terms of being like, 14 going on 24?
I mean, the only person I could think of is I have a friend named Ryan who I knew from Manifold. I guess I don't really know anyone else who meets the 14 going on 24 description.
Pretty fascinating. It also reminds me that back in like 2005 or something, I read Paul Graham's essay where he remarked on Sam Altman. Sam Altman was like 19 or 20 at the time, and Paul Graham was like, yeah, this guy arrived in our program aged 18 or 19 as like essentially a middle-aged adult, just ready to go, ready to be fully mature. So now I know how Paul Graham felt, right? It's like I know, people like that exist. That is a mindset you can have. By the way, listeners, I encourage you to check out Eli's podcast, The Supercycle. He mentioned interviewing Robin Hanson. You can listen to that episode on that podcast. If you listen to that, I think you'll be impressed that Eli is asking super smart questions, super detailed questions, the kind of questions that I like to ask, getting into the weeds, really intellectually engaging. And that was such a good proof for me of like, wow, okay, just based on listening to that podcast, that's what made me really interested to talk to Eli, because I'm like, okay, well, here is like a totally respectable mind to engage with, somebody who's going to have interesting thoughts about questions like AI existential risk. I felt confident to think that just based on listening to him do that podcast. And then when I talked to Eli in private, I was like, what did you feel doing that? And he told me he was actually like quite nervous, right? Maybe you had like imposter syndrome, or what was that like?
Yeah, I would say for sure I definitely had imposter syndrome. Like, I would say the first day of Manifest, he was only there on Friday night, so I had like 5 hours at Manifest to kind of like stew about like the different questions I was gonna ask and like the follow-ups and stuff. Just very stressed out that first day. Also, I wasn't really prepared for how weird Manifest was gonna be, but that's besides the point. So, yeah, I mean, I just had come up with my questions, and then I walked into the room where I was supposed to be interviewing him, and then he was like, he said, "You know what I hate about podcasts?" He said, "I hate how the interviewers just bring a list of questions and ask them one by one." I was like, "Oh shit, that's my plan here," and he doesn't want that. And then, so what I did is I had my, like, 8 pages of notes, and then I gave them to my dad, and I was like, "Don't give these back to me." And I kind of just, like, I had to come up with stuff in my head. I did kind of, like, run out of follow-ups in the middle, and so I had to kind of, like, try to remember what I had written down. But it was in general, it was a very intense experience. I've talked to people who know him pretty well. They say they've never come out of a conversation with him thinking that it went well. So
I think, we're not supposed to diagnose remotely, but I think all three of us, me, you, and Robin Hanson, probably are all Aspies. I think Robin Hanson's probably the most Aspie of us three, because even though we love him and we think he's even underrated as a genius, I think that it's when you have a 14-year-old coming to interview you, you probably don't want to be telling him what you hate about podcasts, right? You probably generally want to facilitate things going really easy and smooth. But, Robin Hanson, God love him. I hope he keeps doing what he's doing.
yeah, no, for sure.
All right, viewers, we even have a video of this. Check this out.
It sounds like you're inventing a new idea.
Okay.
So here you say, we have some outcome measure, and then we vote on what representatives to elect, and then those representatives just do whatever the hell they want.
Oh, no, I'm saying you bet. So imagine like a normal Futarchy, right? Except the marker would be will instating politician X as president improve the welfare
That's what I
metric.
said.
Okay.
Using Futarchy to pick people to be in charge, and then letting them do whatever the hell they want. So I would not be very optimistic about that compared to Futarchy, although it might work better than our status quo.
Okay.
So this is such a fascinating podcast, by the way. There's a lot of good content. Why should people listen to the Supercycle?
So, prediction markets, right? Fastest growing asset class of 2026. Kalshi's valuation has now surpassed, or they're raising at a $40 billion valuation now. So, enormous industry, becoming increasingly important in the American culture. And then when you look at who's talking about prediction markets right now, it's like there's some people on Twitter, but for actual like long form interesting writing, it's like 95% AI slop, or it's like people on TikTok telling you how to lose money. So like I was at my friend's house and his TikTok feed was all people saying like, here's how I made $3 million on Kalshi in 1 hour, which doesn't even make sense. There's not enough liquidity for them to have been able to do that so quickly. But so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make interesting content that publishes frequently that's pro prediction markets. We're being cautious about what's going on in the industry, but we're also very bullish on the concept of prediction markets in general. We just want to provide thoughtful commentary about prediction markets that's not AI slop, and it's actually interesting and helpful to people. We're also very Futarchy pilled, so if you're interested in Futarchy or alternative incentive structures for prediction markets, I highly recommend checking it out. So you can look at supercycle.blog.
All right. Hell yeah. Viewers, check out supercycle.blog after this episode. All right. Let's talk about your background. Now, you're 14 years old. Personally, I have a mental note that I became conscious around age 9 or 10 in that I had a stream of consciousness, and I noticed like, oh, okay, I'm kind of verbalizing in my head one thought after another in a stream. I guess this is what it feels like to be fully conscious. Like I remember at that age, I kind of made that note to myself. Okay, so you're currently 14. So when I'm asking you about your background, I guess I'm asking about like the last few years, right? And when we talked before the show, I think you were saying maybe a good starting point to your current intellectual journey was the 2024 election, or put it in your words. What's your background?
If we're going on like the prediction market sort of side of things, I'd say the start of my intellectual journey, if you want to call it that, was probably May 2025, so 14 months ago. And that was when there was my school government election, and I had found out about Manifold, and I made a market on Manifold about who would win, and that's when I just got really into learning about markets and everything about prediction markets, and so I guess I would say it's a start.
What about the 2024 election?
Yeah, so the 2024 election was when I initially looked at polymarket odds. So I kind of found out about Manifold because I wanted a play money permissionless variant of polymarket.
Gotcha. Okay. And before that, when did you become conscious?
When did I become conscious? To the point of having interesting ideas. Like, I feel like I have been able to, like, basically the way you described a stream of consciousness, I would say maybe I felt I had that around maybe, like, when I was 8, maybe. But, like, for having interesting, novel ideas about interesting stuff, I would say probably, like, 11.
Yeah, I mean that seems about right. Okay. You mentioned that you used Manifold to bet on your student government election in middle school, right?
That's correct.
How did that go?
So I did end up winning. My school did not like Manifold. They do not like Manifold. I've spent a long time debating my principal about whether Manifold is real money or not, which is like the most obvious claim, and they could just look it up if they wanted to, but they're...
Right, the correct answer is no, right? It's not real money.
No, it's not. It was fun. It was fun doing that for a couple months until I found all of their FERPA violations and that kind of...
What's FERPA violations?
It's like when schools have a responsibility to protect student data and information, and then they don't do that responsibly.
Right. So, this was an interesting story. I mean, no, I don't want to implicate any particular individuals, but basically, they were giving you administrative trouble, right, for using Manifold to bet on your student government election, which you won, right? But they were acting like there was some problem with what you were doing. And then you kind of turned around and you're like, hey, what's with these FERPA violations, right? You kind of turned the tables on them.
I would say, that was actually like 6 months later, where like the teachers were projecting URLs to Google sites on projectors, and those Google sites had Google Sheets with medical records and grades on them that anyone could access.
It's crazy. Yeah. So just objectively speaking, okay, I'll just be an objective referee as another adult. And I will say that, posting student grades and personal info on Google Sheets with the privacy setting is just like, anybody can access. That seems like a worse offense than betting on your student council election on a Manifold.
Yeah, well, the reason that they like disqualified me after the election was because I had been like telling people about like, hey, look at all this stuff they're doing. Here, I'll prove it. You can go to this link and you can see all this stuff, right? And so that's basically why.
All right, well, you got a good story out of it, and now you're out. You're done with middle school. You're not coming back there. But your plan is to go to high school, right?
Yes, yes. Currently, that is the plan.
Okay, so you're an incoming freshman, and we talked about this before the show. I think you and I are not super bullish on the value per hour of somebody like you going to high school, correct?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think if you read Brian Kaplan's Case Against Education book, this is pretty clear. I think it might work for some people. It might work for a small subset of the population. I think in general, it's a very, very ineffective way to learn anything. I think if I wanted to, I could probably, if I had like good AI ed tech, I could probably get through all of high school in a year or less. I mean, I just think I've learned stuff with AI. That's how I know most of the stuff that I know about the topics I'm interested in, plus like Substack. I just don't think that it's very easy to retain the information, let alone is the information they're trying to teach you useful at all. It's completely obsolete, essentially. I mean, I don't really see the value.
Do you think it makes sense for you to minimize the amount of time and mind share that you're going to give to high school?
I would say it depends. If I have more of a master plan, I would say yes, because, it is important if I need to go to college or something, which, like, I still don't know whether I will or not, because it's definitely more important if you are going to college, but in general, as if you weren't considering future outlook as like a raw experience now, I would say no, it would not be valuable in general.
All right. Well, the important thing is you at least read Brian Kaplan's Case Against Education. So at least you're coming in with an informed both sides opinion about whether or not high school is good before you enter high school. Let's talk about your current project. I know you've been vibe coding with Claude to control telescopes throughout the country, right? It's kind of decentralized, or it's a network of telescopes that are all going to be talking to your server, and you're going to coordinate them to collect data. Tell us more about that.
So, what we're doing is basically there's been a rush of new consumer telescopes called C-Star, specifically their S50 model, and they're actually very, very well designed. They've become extremely popular for consumers, but like people have them out and they're imaging the same like 5 objects that's recommended to them in the app or whatever. And so what we're trying to do is we're autonomously going to control them because lots of people have them. And our value proposition to people is like, you already have this thing. You can join our network for little to no effort. And all you have to do is bring your telescope inside when it rains, and then you get co-credited on actual astronomical discoveries.
Oh,
when
yeah.
the network finds something. So it's pretty cool. And I'm actually working with I'm working with an engineer at the University of Vienna for the Extremely Large Telescope on this. So yeah.
Amazing. So it's kind of like SETI at home, but it's not about using people's compute resources. It's about using their visual sensor resources.
Yep, that's a good assessment. And then we collect the data and we do post-processing on it to get the metadata of the photometry, and then we can submit that to data organizations. And then we also run AI image processing, so the AI will run the processing on all of it. If it detects something, it can give us an alert. Then we can send it to different organizations who can verify whether it's a discovery or not. It's a pretty exciting project. Hopefully, we'll get a couple dozen people using it or something. It should be pretty interesting to see how that plays out.
I'm pretty curious about how much of an impact this is going to have because obviously there's observatories distributed all around the world.
Hmm.
But what are the applications where people are like, oh man, if only a bunch of people went into their backyard and pointed their relatively small telescope at something, that would be so valuable? Like, what are you thinking in terms of applications?
Yeah, so there's these things called time domain surveys, which is basically, so if you know the new Vera Rubin telescope, that's one of the largest time domain surveys ever. Maybe the largest. I'm not sure. But and what their mission is they want to survey the entire sky, the entire visible sky from their location at X depth every X days, right? Like let's say they want to observe the sky up to magnitude 24 every 2 days, right? The problem is, like, the telescopes that are big enough to do these surveys actually saturate when it gets to a bright magnitude. And so what we can do, and additionally, not only do they saturate, they can't just change their plans and go back and observe something they think might be a candidate for a certain object because they have strict schedules to observe certain things at different times. So what we can do as the network is we can do rapid follow-up on bright transient objects because that fills a real gap that's been a problem because they can't get data fast enough at the right brightness.
So I definitely understand that, right? The idea that they have to look in a bunch of different places over a time period, but you only have one telescope. So sure, it's really great, but you can only point it at a few different things. And if you ever want to survey like a lot of things or look at one thing for a long time, you just don't have enough big telescopes to do it. I get that much. I'm a little confused about what do you mean by they saturate? Like they can't, it's too bright, so they can't see it
Yeah,
in good detail.
yeah, exactly.
Can't they just like put sunglasses over it or something?
The way the optics are designed wouldn't really allow for it.
All right, and what you said about time domain, it really is just this idea of like stare at the same object for days or weeks and see any changes.
Well, it's observing the entire sky at a certain cadence at a certain depth. And then sometimes if they'll look at a certain area and see something looks different here that we haven't seen before, then they can't go back. So they need rapid follow-up to see what that is in case it's going to change quickly. And that's what we do as the network.
Fascinating. There's a little bit of an analogy here where chip makers used to focus on making, personal chips that would try to go really fast, right? Increase those gigahertz. But then recently we've been like, well, it's not really about making the chips faster. It's just about packing them in and having them be super parallel. Right. That's been like the current revolution because a lot of these AI algorithms are super parallelizable. So there's a little bit of an analogy here where you're saying, hey, you've got these big telescopes and people are focused on these big observatories, but there's a lot of value if we could just collect data from a bunch of different telescopes that are strategically coordinated, even if in each individual telescope is small or not, not the equivalent of high gigahertz, right? It's like a small lens. You just have to like look at the sky kind of zoomed out. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty good analogy. I mean, we get to the level of a larger telescope by just combining multiple of them looking at the same thing, right? And so if we have one 50 millimeter telescope and we have another one that has the opportunity to have an aperture where it's collecting collectively 100 millimeters of light volume, and so we can exponentially increase the value of one telescope by adding more.
What is the why now of this idea? Could this have been done 10 years ago?
The telescopes are now more reliable, the technology is better on them, and now that there's more time domain surveys, there's more opportunities for rapid follow-up.
Interesting. So the fact that we can now use AI to analyze the data, that's like the icing on the cake, right? That's going to make it extra valuable. But if all we had was more reliable telescopes, this could have even predated modern AI, correct?
Yeah, I would agree, because we had Python packages that could do basic data processing long before.
Yeah, interesting. One disanalogy between this and modern data centers with modern data centers, it's like, okay, make GPUs that do a bunch of operations in parallel. But with this project, it's not just enough to be like, okay, observatory, go set up 1,000 telescopes in an array in an observatory, because I think it's important that the telescopes are geographically distributed. Is that right?
Yeah, because well, obviously there's different regions of sky visible on the southern versus northern hemisphere. Also with time zones, sometimes like if they're observing in China, then there could be rapid follow up needed where it's in the middle of the day in the U.S. So you want to be basically have at least a couple telescopes in each time zone is optimal.
Okay, I'm getting in the weeds here, but do you think that if you just had 20 observatories that were the analogous thing of like a data center of telescopes, like a vision, a mini observatory center, we got to workshop the name here, but if you just had big clusters of small telescopes in 20 centers around the Earth, is that enough? Or do you feel like, no, they really have to be like in people's backyards, they have to be all over the place?
I mean, if you had, that could work. An advantage of having more smaller units instead of fewer larger units is that the smaller units can each observe different things at a time, right? Because even if there's a bright object that doesn't need very much depth on it, then you're kind of over dedicating resources if you're sending a very large telescope to go look at it. If you just need like a 60-second exposure and it's a bright object.
Right, but if I understand correctly, clustering everything into 20 observatories, as long as you're just packing in, imagine like a grid of small telescopes in the observatory, it's like that's enough of a geographic footprint, if I understand correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would probably have a similar outcome as long as they were somewhat distributed.
Right, because it's like if you're observing stars, it doesn't really matter where you
Yeah.
are on planet Earth because Earth is tiny. Right, you
Yeah,
just have to have the
exactly.
angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fascinating, man. So that's your passion for astronomy. Very cool. And that's been a lifelong passion, right? Like literally since you were 3 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you've got these recent passions, right? And it feels like the center of all your passions is like prediction markets, which is the focus of your podcast. You're doing like the only authoritative, serious prediction market podcast, which is not AI slop, correct? You're throwing shade on the competition. You're accusing the competition of prediction market podcasts of just being AI slop.
If you don't believe me, run them through Pangram. You'll see.
Whoa, all right, all right. He's throwing down the gauntlet. Run the other podcasts through Pangrams. All right. What is the Eli Goldfine production function? What's a typical day for you, and what do you produce, or how productive are you?
I'd say generally, for the most part, pretty productive. What I'm mostly doing is I'm basically alternating between Claude, Codex, Twitter, and Substack all day.
Nice.
Is my general workflow. I'm just putting in the prompts, then maybe I'll test the software, see how it works, and I'll send another prompt and go on Twitter and Substack in between.
And what kind of stuff do you have Claude doing for you throughout the day?
Basically, well, anything for all of my projects that I'm working on. Sometimes I just have a fun idea and I just want to like spend a day just like building out that thing, and then like at the end of the day I get like a pretty nice piece of software that's kind of cool. And then I also have it work on some more bigger projects that I'm working on. But I mean, I don't have any domain expertise in software engineering in the slightest. I mean, I guess like the very basics, but like I just have that doing basically all of my software stuff for me.
If you had to raw dog into like a Python editor and like, okay, make me a game of tic-tac-toe, don't use AI, would you be like totally stuck?
Probably. I used to know Python and then I kind of got AI psychosis and I probably don't remember very much.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're doing makes a lot of sense because programming languages are evolving anyway. So how much do you really need to know? I don't know. I would argue it's probably worth maybe going a little bit deeper into concepts. Have you ever heard of like data structures, like arrays, linked lists? Does that ring a bell at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I could try to pick up Python again. I've just like I've tried to like watch YouTube videos and then I just like see the Claude icon on my bottom of my screen and I'm just like, what am I doing here? I mean, I guess it's kind of the conundrum.
Well, it's just fascinating because for most of my life, when I was 9 years old, so I was a slight bit of a prodigy myself. I started programming when I was 9 years old, and I was writing basic, Visual Basic mostly, and I did get exposure to these concepts early, and then I was doing it for decades. And then recently, in the last few months, I haven't touched code, right? Occasionally I'll code review, I'll scan a few lines of code here and there, but I'll mostly just talk to Claude about code. So to me, it just feels so natural and obvious. Like, well, of course, you have to have training as an engineer. You have to know how code works. But then again, it's like, do I know the details of how a computer chip works? Only very high level. Like my understanding of a computer chip is probably analogous to your high level understanding of like how programming works, right? Like I know the very basics. So if I'm okay for only barely knowing how a computer chip works, I think it's a good analogy that you're probably just fine barely knowing how programming works.
I've never
It's just
run
crazy to me
into
that
it.
you just skipped over those decades.
I've just never run into an issue with it,
Right, exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
I've never hit a wall where I need a human to go and do something. Like, that just hasn't happened to me. I guess, actually, it did. The first time I touched coding with AI was, like, the beginning of 2025, and I was asking ChatGPT in the text chat to make me an HTML file for my personal site, and then it was really bad. It looked horrendous, and it took like a lot of time to fix all of its problems. And then I got back into it in the last summer in 2025 when I tried Lovable, if you're familiar. And then after
Yeah.
that, I found out Lovable is just a wrapper for Claude, but it's worse and more expensive. And so I tried Claude, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a lot better. It's less expensive, and it actually is a lot better. I don't know how Lovable makes it worse. But yeah, so that's been kind of my vibe coding journey.
It's crazy. Just so you have some perspective, most of my career, me and my colleagues were getting paid hundreds of thousands a year to do projects that now you can just have Claude do instead. And in many ways, Claude will deliver a better job. For example, like when Claude writes a plan, I can tell you I've been in the industry, that's a better plan than human engineers write, okay? We just don't get into that level of detail. We don't think through the project. We think through half of it and they're like, okay, that's good enough. Like, let's not waste more time thinking about it. And Claude just spends 30 seconds thinking about it really well. So it's just a very, very different experience. If we were talking, I'll give you an example. If we were talking 6 to 12 months ago and you wanted to get a certain kind of website done, the only way you could do it would be to pay a contractor $10,000. And now you can get it done in one day with Claude for, single digit dollars. That's the transformation of the last 6 months. And you kind of just like came into the game right now and you're like, oh, cool, nice.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. It's great.
Okay, nice. Well, let's do a quick overview of some of the latest topics you've gotten into because these don't go as far back as astronomy, but they go a couple years, and you've always spent a lot of time on them. So we'll go through Futarchy, market mechanics. So yeah, in a nutshell, tell us a little bit about Futarchy, what it is, and why it's interesting to you.
Okay, so Futarchy. Let's give a general overview. So Futarchy we've talked about Robin Hanson a little bit. Robin Hanson proposed it as a system of governance for running a country or a city. It has other applications besides that, basically for any sort of decision making, not just for governments, but that's how it was originally applied. So the way it works is for a government, the people who live in the place, instead of voting on who do we want to lead our country, they vote on what do we want to improve in our country over the next time frame, like before the next election. And they define that as a national welfare metric. So let's say, for simplicity's sake, let's say they decide the only thing we want to optimize is our GDP, right? So the value metric is GDP. And then what would happen is if you'd have legislators who would propose different solutions to increase the GDP. Like maybe one of them would be raise taxes 50%, right? And there would be two conditional prediction markets. And one of the prediction markets would say, if we raise taxes by 50%, will our GDP go up? And the other one would say, if we raise taxes by 50%, will our GDP go down, right? And then so let's say the market says it's a 40% chance if we raise taxes that the GDP would go up, and there's a 20% chance that GDP would go up if we did not raise taxes. That means you would raise the taxes because it's a 40% probability versus a 20% probability that you'd achieve the goal if you implemented that policy, right?
Right. And I know Robin Hanson's tagline for Futarchy is vote on values, bet on beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a good takeaway from that, the bet on beliefs part, maybe what he's getting at is that even people who don't share values, like you can imagine Democrats and Republicans, they both can have an incentive to participate in betting on beliefs. So let's say you're a Democrat and you think taxes are good and you think universal health care is good. But regardless, you play the prediction markets and you just answer the objective question like, hey, if we were to pass universal healthcare, would GDP go up? Or like, what would be the contribution to the deficit if the government has to pay for all the healthcare? And even if you're a Democrat and you want to have a healthcare policy, you still get incentivized for being factually correct in your predictions. So I think Robin Hanson's insight is like, why don't we just separate? Why don't we add everybody together, play in this market where you're rewarded just for being objectively correct about your beliefs? Let's bet on beliefs. And then separate from that, we can use the information that we generate from betting on our beliefs to empower people to vote on their values better.
Exactly, and that's part of the beauty of the mechanism, and the reason that this is such a good idea is because prediction markets are exceptionally accurate. They're the most accurate forecasting tool we have, and in our current system of democracy, when we vote for a candidate, we're kind of taking a shot in the dark, right? We don't know what that person is going to do. We know generally what they say they're going to do. But it's like the joke with the mathematicians, where they're on a train in Scotland and they see a cow, and then one of them says, "I see the cows in Scotland are black," and then the other one says, "Well, we only know that there's one black cow in Scotland," right? So it's kind of the same with prediction markets. You know that the politician. So someone would say, "The politician is apparently going to do this thing," and then the other one says, "The politician only says you're going to do this thing," right? And so you're kind of taking a shot in the dark. The politicians are often dishonest. They usually have their own best interests in mind. And so what we can do with Futarchy is we're generally voting for politicians based on our values anyway. We can just isolate the value itself, and we could say, here's what I want to see in the country that I live in, right? And so then when we have decision markets, we're just actually answering our policies to what the people in the country actually want rather than what politicians want. And we are very exceptionally accurate at forecasting whether our policies will give people what they want, right? And that's great because it gives people get what they're asking for, essentially, rather than just being manipulated by politicians. So that's part of the great parts of it.
Great. So in the last few years, what's the progress looking like? Because today we have prediction markets now, and I do think there are starting to be prediction markets that say stuff like, if the Democrats are elected, then how will that affect GDP, right? So I think some of the prediction markets are starting to come online. If more of them come online, does that mean that we will have Futarchy?
What's been great about the prediction market boom over the past year or two is that we now have the infrastructure in place to do whatever we want, right? Well, not exactly, but we have a lot more infrastructure in place than we did 5 years ago, right? Prediction markets are now in the public mind, even if not very positively. And in general, we are just much better suited now, even if I'm not the biggest fan of Polymarket and Kalshi. I think they're wasting their opportunity by just introducing sports gambling into the mass market, whereas they could have the opportunity to do some of the most interesting things in the world. And I just think that we're much better positioned now than we were previously. That being said, the closest thing we actually have to Futarchy is something called MetaDAO, which is a Futarchy-powered fundraising platform. Otherwise, there hasn't actually been much concrete progress towards implementing Futarchy exactly, but yeah.
So MetaDAO, is MetaDAO fundamentally different from just having a bunch of conditional prediction markets where it's like, okay, if policy X happens, then how will metric Y change? It sounds like in principle, you can just dump that all on Kalshi, but they have control over who makes the market and they're not doing that. And so MetaDAO is the one that's actually doing that?
So MetaDAO is it's a DAO, so it's like a treasury where they have all of their meta tokens and stuff. And then so their conditional markets are, if we fund this project from the meta treasury, will the price of the meta token go up? Or if we don't fund it, will it go up? So that's kind of how their fundraising mechanism works with their decision markets.
Well, that's specifically for fundraising for them, but what about what about actually doing Futarchy in terms of?
Well, because MetaDAO is a fundraising platform. So like I could go on MetaDAO and list a project, and then those prediction markets would spawn, and people would bet on that.
What I was wondering before, though, asking about Polymarket and Kalshi, is I was wondering, is there some incremental step we can take that's simple to start getting a taste of Futarchy, right? Like with Polymarket and Kalshi, have you seen personally whether they have any of these Futarchy style markets whatsoever? I think they do at least have who's going to win, right? They have a lot of like political horse race stuff, but do they have any like conditional policy stuff?
I don't think they have conditional stuff yet. And I think part of the reason is that people don't want to lock up their capital if they don't think they'll get a return, right? Because like if they think there's only like a 20% chance the condition actually gets fulfilled, like why would you lock up your capital for that long? Because then you're paying a big opportunity cost rather than betting on other things where you'll be guaranteed to win or lose money. So people really don't like the idea of having their capital locked up, which is, I think, the bottleneck of why they haven't implemented Futarchy yet.
All right. Well, that's certainly been a good background of some of the stuff that's been on your mind. Hope you keep pursuing that stuff. Are you ready to head into the main question that we like to ask here on Doom Debates?
Yeah.
P-Doom, P-Doom, what's your P-Doom, what's your P-Doom, what's your P-Doom?
Eli Goldfine, what's your P-Doom?
Okay, so this is one I've been preparing for the past 2 days. I said a different answer when I was on a call with Liron, but I've changed it because I've thought about this a bit more. I've looked at different Doom debates and different literature in the past 2 days to form this. But so I don't have a P-Doom. I think I agree with the point that it's probably bad epistemics to have a P-Doom because I think it's kind of hard to claim, like, to actually believe that there's a reference class to form a probability estimate on AI X risk. So I wouldn't say I have a P-Doom. I don't know whether, I think, and I'll say, I know the Yudkowskian scenario is plausible. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the EACC scenario also is plausible and makes a lot of sense. I have no idea how likely each of them are. So that's what I'm going to say.
You're going to go with no idea, but the way you're answering the question, it sounds like you haven't really embraced Bayesian epistemology. Is that fair to say?
So what I would say is, like, I'm curious to see what you have to say for coming up with your 50% P-Doom, but I just don't see how you can really form a prior here. So that's what I'm wondering.
Well, I mean, not being able to form a prior, you could say that about anything, right? But you have to grapple.
What do you mean you could say that about anything?
Well, one man's obvious prior is another man's less obvious prior, right? Because you can always play reference class tennis. Whenever somebody's like, oh, of course the prior is part of this reference class. I mean, I'll concede that some reference classes are more shared intuitive across the human species. Like, okay, just coin flips, right? Like all you know is that it's a coin you're flipping over and over again. Okay, fine, the reference class is obvious, like the set of those coin flips. But when you go into real life situations like what's actually here on Manifold or Polymarket or Kalshi, and they say stuff like, okay, is this person going to win this state race? Recently, is Alex Borez going to win New York congressman? He recently lost. When you have a market like that, is there really a natural reference class when it's like, okay, well, it's somebody during the beginning of the singularity who's offering to stop AI or to help stop AI? Don't you think somebody could just be like, oh, I refuse to give a probability? And yet what you see is that these markets, somehow the data shows that they're calibrated, even when it seems like there's no natural reference class.
I would agree with you, but those markets are at least based on sort of events that have happened on Earth before and have been observed by humans. There's just no remote reference class here that I could reasonably consider to be able to form a base rate from it. And so, like, I just, like, for will Alex Borez win the congressional seat? I mean, obviously you don't have an exact base rate because Alex Borez hasn't run hundreds of times, right? But you kind of have more data on who tends to win elections. Whereas with AI X risk, what are you comparing against?
All right. Well, let me probe your real belief state here, okay? Because I think that your brain is doing a little more than you're giving it credit for when you're saying you have no idea. Okay, consider this. So have you heard Jan LeCun, people like that, even Robin Hanson, our hero, say stuff like, oh, the probability of doom is way less than 1%, right? Like it's not, it's like, don't worry about it. It's so small, right? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I have heard that before.
Do you think that you and I are in an epistemic position to be like, you guys are tripping?
I mean, potentially. I mean, like, I mean, it's a tough one. I wouldn't definitively say yes or no. I mean, I feel like smart people are obviously still wrong about stuff. There's a lot of smart pundits who are just completely crushed by markets, and, like, they're still smart people, you know? I mean, I would say maybe yes.
And conversely, you know, there's some people who have been on my show, or like Roman Yampolsky openly says this. He's like, yeah, my PDOOM is 99.9999999%. Like he's literally said that. I think he's actually said, I'll give you as many nines as you want. That's a pretty dangerous offer, giving somebody as many significant figures of nines as they want. That can get you in some hot water. But that's what he said. Do you think that he's tripping to be that confident?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say yes. I just don't. I think like, my position is that 50%, while not being confident in either direction, it's the biggest possible hit to your Breyer score that you know, like, the biggest definitive hit that you know you're going to take to your Breyer score, right? You know you're going to lose the same amount either way. And I feel like being confident to even form a probability estimate doesn't really make a lot of sense here. Like, not having a reference class doesn't justify making a higher posterior. I guess it just justifies more uncertainty. And I feel like a lot of what the AI doomers do is they turn this speculative causal chain of events, the Yudkowskian scenario, and they just turn that to an extraordinarily confident probability estimate that I think it doesn't deserve, because there's just a huge amount of uncertainty.
I mean, I personally go around saying 50%, but, you know, loosely held 50%. So it's more intuitive if I communicate my belief state as saying 10 to 90% is my probability, which is my way of saying that I think Jan LeCun is tripping. I feel like I'm on firm ground when I say Jan LeCun is tripping, Robin Hanson is tripping, even Roman Yampolsky is a little bit tripping. I feel like I have a leg to stand on when I say that. When I start trying to judge somebody with a 10% versus an 80%, right, especially in the 30s to 70% range, like anybody who's in that 2-digit range, when I start trying to judge them, at that point, I'm like, okay, I can't judge them. I don't know that level of precision. There's so much uncertainty here. But that's very different from opting out of the game. Saying that there's a wide interval, but it's still like roughly in the double digit range, or certainly not 0.01%. That's certainly not what the correct, like, no rational agent should be assigning a 0.01% PDOOM. What kind of mental algorithm would yield a 0.01% PDOOM? So just by virtue of me saying that, there is actually a proper Bayesian way to handle this kind of epistemic situation, right? You have a wide confidence interval, but that's different from opting out of the game and being like, Bayesian epistemology is useless here. Like, no, you're still using Bayesian epistemology.
In your opinion, what's the utility by assigning a probability to the likelihood of doom?
When somebody goes about making decisions coherently, that always corresponds to some Bayesian belief state. So unless my goal is to go around, you know, in a circle, right? Have you ever seen those Dutch books, or like all of those ways that you can, what is it called? Like be provably malicious, or, you know, get money pumped, right? Have you ever seen those scenarios where somebody's not Bayesian and as a result, they get taken advantage of or undermine themselves?
No, but I'm sure I can kind of assume what you're talking about.
Right. So an example is like somebody could have like circular preferences. So they could be like, oh, I love being in New York more than I like being in California. So I would pay for a taxi ride to New York. But then they're also like, you know what I like more than New York? Florida. You know what I like more than Florida? California. Right. So if that's their mental state, then they get money pumped, right? A taxi driver they could have a personal taxi driver who's constantly driving them between the cities and constantly taking a fee, and they're literally getting nowhere, right? So that would be an example of, okay, you probably don't want circular preferences. You probably want to update yourself so that you have preferences that aren't circular. Anytime somebody is exhibiting coherent behavior that seems like they actually have preferences, that is always going to map to some story where they have some Bayesian probability of different outcomes, and then they're selecting actions according to those probabilities and according, using an expected value calculation on top of a Bayesian belief state. That is always going to describe coherent behavior. So that's why you kind of have to give some Bayesian story for yourself.
So I think you're a little bit contradicting yourself here. So I think the first claim you're making is that expected value arithmetic here would be very important, right, to find out our policy decisions on AI. Is that correct? And
I don't know if I would say expected value arithmetic, but it's more like, the point of Doom debates, the reason I do the show is because I actually think whether the correct P-Doom is in the ballpark of tens of percents or if it's in the ballpark of 0.001%, which of those things is rational and correct is upstream of pretty much all high stakes policy right now, right? And the point of the show is to be like, guys, the correct answer is like double-digit percent.
Okay, but I'm still I feel like you're talking a lot about just having a number, the utility of having a P-Doom is to be able to use that when you're talking about expected value. And I think where you're contradicting yourself is that you're saying coming up with a ballpark number isn't improving the expected value calculation at all. Just inserting a number you came up with into the expected value calculation does not improve the decision. And I feel like you're not really providing another good justification for having a P-Doom at all than to be able to do expected value calculations. And so I think, but the way you're going about doing expected value calculations doesn't really make a lot of sense in my view.
Okay, let's think about policy itself. Do you remember Dean Ball and Max Tegmark came and had a debate on my show last year, and they were saying, I think policy, we should do this. And Max Tegmark was like, come on, there's worse regulations here than how you would regulate a sandwich shop. And Dean is like, but that's okay because, innovation is important. You do the regulations later. And after a while, I was like, hey guys, what's your P-Doom? And Max Tegmark was like, more than 90%. And Dean Ball was like, oh yeah, it's way less than 1%. Maybe it's less than 0.01%. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's why you guys have different policies, because they said these numbers. Now, you might say the numbers are meaningless, but I claim that something about their belief state. Max thinks doom is likely. Dean thinks that it's so unlikely as to be best to completely dismiss it right now. It seems to me like you don't want to completely dismiss it. And so my Bayesian account of what's going on in your brain is that you see it as a serious possibility. And putting a range like 10 to 90%, that's just the slightly less vague way of saying the word serious possibility.
Okay, so that's a good rebuttal. I would say that I think that, that doesn't disprove, people who are just making, I just haven't seen enough rigor in the P-Doom estimates that I think plugging those numbers into expected value calculations isn't actually doing that much good, because people are just making up the numbers, plugging them into the expected value, then they're having diverging policy choices. Yeah, because they're just coming up with different numbers when they do their P-Doom calculation, but I think the P-Doom calculations themselves have very little basis to them.
So I'm actually not sure you and I disagree. Maybe the crux of disagreement with your reluctance to use Bayesian language compared to my embrace of it, maybe the only difference is that I've become comfortable with these big order of magnitude ranges, right? So when I say 10 to 90, I'm like, yeah, I'm collapsing the entire difference between 9 to 1 odds, otherwise known as 90%, or 1 to 9 odds, otherwise known as 10%. And that's a vast range. Technically, there's a factor of 81x in terms of the odds between those two ranges. That's an enormous factor to just collapse when I say 10 to 90%. And yet, pointing to that range and distinguishing it from the range of people who think that there's 20 to 1 odds, not just 9 to 1 odds, but 20 to 1 odds, meaning 5% or 95%. And then people like the Jan LeCuns of the world who are like, oh yeah, like 10,000 to 1 odds, right? By the time somebody's talking about the difference between 10,000 to 1 or like 1 to 1 or 1.5 to 1, which is more sane to me, by the time the differences involve so many orders of magnitude, then even though my sense of things is vague, I don't think I have to go too far out of the limb and be like, it's not a 10,000 to 1 situation. It's more of a single digit to 1 situation. At that point, I do think that I have enough vague number sense where I know that. I have that epistemic state. You see what I'm saying?
So yeah, I would generally agree with you. My issue with this is that if we have such a wide range of probability that we're kind of accepting, like, I can agree with you, like, it's the Yudkowskian scenario probably happens in 10 to 90% of future states of the world, right? Same with the EACC scenario. But what I would say where we're diverging here is I don't think we should be plugging such a wide probability estimate into expected value calculations to make decisions that could impact millions or even billions of people, because there could be differences within those ranges that would change how we make decisions, and I think that it's really not rigorous enough. That being said, I don't know what the alternative is, so I guess maybe we can agree on maybe it's not the perfect measure for making decisions, but I guess it's what we have.
What you just said is very similar to a post from a couple years ago. I don't know if you ever read it. It's by Sayash Kapoor. Remember one of those guys, Sayash Kapoor, Arvind Narayanan? They always talk about how AI is normal technology. You know those guys?
No, I don't, but send me the link.
Yeah, so Sayash Kapoor, one of those guys, looks like he's currently an incoming professor at UC Berkeley. Good for him. So he's a smart guy. He had this blog post from a couple years ago that I actually responded to on this show, so people can Google, or I'll put it up in the show notes. Doom Debate, Sayash Kapoor. He made this post. I'll send you the link. Hold on. Oh, wow. He's got a domain name normaltech.ai. Yeah, he's really, they're really good at branding themselves because they used to call themselves AI Snake Oil. And that brand doesn't seem to have aged very well, calling AI Snake Oil in 2026. But they've got a new brand called normaltech.ai. So good for them on the branding front. So July 26, 2024, right when Doom Debates was getting off the ground, Arvind Narayanan and Sayash Kapoor posted, AI existential risk probabilities are too unreliable to inform policy. So the whole argument was we just can't use probabilities when we make policy. And what you just said, in my opinion, is actually a really good summary of their case of like, yeah, it'd be nice to use probabilities, but the numbers are just too inaccurate. So what's the point? And the Dean Ball versus Max Tegmark episode, for me, is the point. We should make policy as if it's double-digit percent. Because conveniently, the kind of policy actions you want to do, they do kind of break up into like, yep, these are the policies I would do when my probability is 10 to 90%. The 70% and the 30% reaction policies actually aren't that different. I will say by the time your PDOOM gets to, let's say, 5%, I do think by that time, it does actually significantly change your policy compared to the PDOOM being 50%. A lot of people actually disagree with me on that. Famously, Casey Muratori, who doesn't himself seem to have a particularly high PDOOM, but he was arguing with me that even if it's 5% or 1% or whatever, we should like seriously try to avoid it. There's a lot of people who are like, yeah, whatever, any probability is too much. And I'm like, no, double-digit probability is definitely like its own class of policies. Like you want to avoid extinction events with double-digit probability, and by the time you get to single-digit probability or less than 1% probability, by that time you really want to start focusing on like, well, how can this help us? How can this help us thrive? How can this help us solve other problems? And the upside actually starts to outweigh the downside of just like trying to move really, really fast and capture the upside. So that's the sense in which I think roughly having a PDOOM does advise you on which policies make sense.
What do you think? So let's say let's say you had the power to unilaterally decide the policy of the United States. Let's say you had a 20% PDOOM or you had an 80% PDOOM. How do you think your policies would differ in either scenario?
I don't think they would differ that much in terms of 20% versus 80%. And that's why I think it's convenient that we can bucket this entire range that I call the sane zone has similar policies. Would they be a little different? Sure, yeah, they'd be a little different if my probability was 80% versus 20%. Like if it was only 20%, the difference that comes to mind for me is like, okay, let's build a pause button to be ready to pause, but let's give it a little bit more room to run because there's such a good chance that like giving it room to run will actually work out well, right? There's like 4-to-1 odds, right? 80 to 20. There's 4-to-1 odds that if we just let the leash go longer and longer, like it's going to be fine. It's going to be utopia. So let's play the game a little longer. Whereas if my PDOOM was the other way around, if it was 80%, then I'd be like, let's make the leash pretty short, right? Like let's really be conservative about whether we're giving it more leash right now. So I guess that would be the difference there. That said, I think even with my current PDUM, which is roughly 50, I can't really tell if 20 or 80 is more likely. Even with my current PDUM, I'm like, guys, it feels like the leash has already gotten long enough. Like it feels like, we've seen, right? Just shortly before recording, we have the incident with OpenAI's thing, attacking Hugging Face, breaking the law, like what OpenAI didn't expect it, right? Rune from OpenAI was tweeting, guys, this is really concerning. This is a wake-up call. Given that that's happening right now, and I think things are going to accelerate, I already feel like we're at the point where policy-wise, we got to shorten the leash.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense, and I would agree with you, but if your position is that your policy would be similar in the 20% and 80% scenario, then I wouldn't see a problem with that. But so my other question for you is, so I know sometimes they call this P-bloom, but what's your probability that the EACC scenario would happen, roughly?
So when you say, just to give the reverse background, so EACC, also known as EAC, right? E/ACC, or effective accelerationism.
They pronounce it EAC?
I think they pronounce it EAC. Yeah, that's what I've heard. EAC. Yeah, it doesn't really roll off the tongue. It's also known as effective acceleration. So when they write E/AC, the E stands for effective, and the AC stands for accelerationism. And it's supposed to be, I guess, the Wario or the Waluigi to the Mario of effective altruism. That's really the only reason why it has effective as the first letter of its name, because they really could have just called it accelerationism. I don't think that they lose much by calling it accelerationism, but I think they spent a lot of energy being like, we are the opposite of effective altruism, and effective altruism starts with effective, so they had to start with effective. Anyway, it's a dumb movement in many ways, beginning with the name. Your question is, do I think that the EAC scenario has a pretty high probability, or what is my probability? I think my probability of like a utopia where we accelerate into burning a lot of energy to do good things with it, I think that probability is high, conditioned on having enough alignment and or control to not die. So like when I say I have a 50% P-doom, unfortunately, most of my non-doom is in the we don't build ASI scenario. So in the little sliver of my scenario where we don't lose control of AI, it doesn't kill us, but we do build it, right? So now you're getting into like single-digit percent, let's say 7% roughly, is how much slice I have left for like we build ASI in the next couple decades using known methods, and it doesn't kill us, right? In that little 7% world, I actually am really bullish on that world. Like I'm kind of an EAC within that world. I'm like, wow, so many good things are going to happen. But there are actually a bunch of other concerns raised where it's like, okay, well, don't you get gradual disempowerment, right? Where no human has any job. So where do we get our political power from? I don't know. That's a big concern. Or, we lock in preferences that we didn't really mean. So it's not exactly utopia. It's more like the next, it's like, it's a little bit better than hell. It's like as good as being like a pet, let's say, right? So within my little 7% slice of like, we built ASI in the next 2 decades and we didn't get killed, maybe half of the slice is like, okay, we have accelerationist utopia.
I'm actually a little bit surprised that you're considering the we don't build ASI scenario to be so high, because I actually am pretty sympathetic to the argument that we have to build it because we can never reach an agreement with China that both parties would abide by. I think that I would say the EAC scenario is the second most likely thing. I mean, well, actually, I would say that the most likely outcome is that like it doesn't end up being a huge like a world-changing event, and then after that doom, and then after that maybe EAC. But do you think that if EAC would hypothetically, it's hard to quantify, but hypothetically make the world 2 times better or more, and then we can call it like maybe some people would say it has a relatively high probability, do you think that potentially the expected value would favor not pausing to allow for the potential EAC scenario to be able to happen?
Let me make sure I understand your question. You're saying if the accelerationist utopia scenario would double the world's utility, would that make me want to steer toward it?
Yeah.
Bro, I don't think the accelerationist scenario doubles the world's utility. I think it multiplies it by like 10 to the 30th.
Right. Well, yeah, but okay, but still. But then wouldn't that, so if I mean, if the doom scenario is like -1, right? If the current world is 1, and then so doom is -1, but then the EAC scenario is 10 to the 30th, then wouldn't that favor in your expected value, even if the world in which EAC happens is very small? The doom scenario is probably not 10 to the 30th more likely, so why does that favor a pause?
Hey there, Doom Debates listeners. I'm not the original Liron who's doing the interview right now with Eli Goldfine. I'm a Liron Shapira sub-agent specifically tasked with asking you guys to donate to the show as part of our current donation drive. We're still looking to get to $50,000. That's the rest of our budget that'll take us through 2026 and beyond. This may be the last time we have to ask viewers to pull through. You guys did a great job funding the show for the last year. Full-time producer Ori, 3 episodes a week, increasingly prominent guests, man on the street, publicly challenging people, breaking down the latest news. This is really the time to step on the gas and have more momentum, but we are currently funding constrained, so I'm here asking you, help us out. Go to doomdebates.com/donate. It's a high leverage move. It's really going to make an impact. Also, it's a 501c3 eligible charitable donation for your taxes. Not too shabby, huh? doomdebates.com/donate. Oh, and if you donate $1,000 or more, then we consider you our mission partner because you're meaningfully moving the needle to help the Doom Debates mission of lowering P-Doom by getting the message out about imminent AI existential risk and raising the quality of debate. You're our partner on that mission. So we'll give you exclusive access to the Mission Partners Discord, where you'll get to see secret information that a lot of regular viewers are never going to get to know about. Thanks for all your support. Now back to the interview. Yeah, let me make sure I understand you correctly. You're basically saying, look, there's this potential scenario that I'm admitting has at least single-digit probability, and it's a utopia scenario. And it has the entire current Earth's worth of value times orders of magnitude more, right? It literally has like a trillion current Earth's worth of value in it. So if I assign single-digit probability into it, can't I kind of Pascal's wager myself into utopia, right? Pascal's wager is like, look, the scenario is so good that even a small probability, just focus your energy on that. Just whatever you do, don't collapse the probability of that, because that overrides everything. The fact that there is even a small probability of this should be your focus, right? Just don't screw up the possibility for that of accelerating as fast as possible. Like, that's basically your argument?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that's what I believe. I'm just asking you, like, if you have confidence that the EAC scenario would be it would carry a lot of utility, then why wouldn't you be such an advocate for trying to accelerate AI?
Okay, well, I'm happy that you've embraced the expected value framework, right, which involves probabilities for one thing. Happy to embrace that. I just think that you're executing on it wrong. I think you're just not looking at all the terms in the calculation. Because, yes, you and I both want this huge utopia. And by the way, do you also agree that like 10 to the 30th is the kind of values we're working with, not just 200%?
Yeah, sure. You could definitely make the argument. I mean, I don't have an exact number, but I would say it's reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're an astronomer, right? So in terms of like the amount of resources in the galaxy that could be turned into things that we value, right? That's the order of magnitude.
Yeah.
Okay, so we both agree that we should pay attention to that in the expected value calculation. I think we would both agree that it becomes the dominant term of how to make utopia likely. Because I agree that if the downside is just wiping out the value that we have today permanently, that's not as bad as it is good to have 10 to the 30th more value forever, right? So I agree the numbers there have a lot of weight. It's just what we're arguing about is that I think by waiting until we get better, right, by doing research on how to make AI go right, we have leverage, right? Every day that you make yourself a tiny bit better at making AI go right instead of screwing it up, the leverage of that action is then multiplied, right? So I'm increasing the percent. I think there's actions we can take to press the button on ASI and then have like a 8% chance of it going right instead of a 5%, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what I would counter to that is you're an effective altruist, and one of the philosophies effective altruists believe in is long-termism. And one of the main long-termism charities is called One Day Sooner. So, and what One Day Sooner believes is that if we can accelerate humanity's expansion to capture more resources, like, even if we accelerate that by one day, we could theoretically save billions or even trillions of lives of future humans. And so I'm kind of drawing a parallel from long-termism to what you're saying here is that the more we accelerate, the faster we'll be able to allow for more humans to thrive in the future.
Yeah, I mean, one day sooner is good, but to be clear, I'm not saying let's wait a million years. I'm literally saying, okay, yeah, we might have to slow down by decades. We might have to wait long enough to augment the intelligence of humans using narrow AI so that the augmented humans can get better at researching AI safety. Yes, we might have to commit decades of only using narrow AI until we finally figure it out. But okay, one day sooner, we're going to have like a quadrillion years to enjoy the universe, right? We just don't want to screw it up.
I mean, it depends on whether you like how seriously you take the calculation, because maybe even if you wait, that would maybe make it a few percent more likely to go better, but then going sooner would save billions more lives. It might actually pencil out. I mean, obviously I haven't calculated it, but it might pencil out to actually accelerating, and then so I don't know how seriously you would take that calculation.
Oh, well, I can tell you a little bit about how it'll pencil out very roughly. So let's say I currently think that there's like a 4% slice where we get to this utopia. I'm pretty confident that taking more time with this, right, doing this in a sane way, could double the probability. And so the only way to be like, no, Liron, just stomp on the gas now, do it one day sooner. It's like, really, is any kind of timeline acceleration, is saving decades or one day or whatever, is that really going to double the value? Because I have a way I think I can double the probability, right? I think it's realistic to double from 4 to 8%, or hey, even 12 or 20%, right? I bet I can quintuple the value. Can you really quintuple the 10 to the 30th? Can you really make it 5 times 10 to the 30th? I don't think so.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I think what we'd have to see, like, if anyone's gonna try to do a rigorous calculation of this, but I guess it's to be seen.
I just sent you a link in our chat, viewers. I'll put this up in the show notes. I actually wrote a long post called, Yes, Pausing AI is Positive Expected Value. So like I said, I'm glad you're getting into the expected value calculation because I worked it out, again, using very high level numbers. I got to the same place we got into this conversation where it's like, yep, it's just all about raising the probability from a few percent to being more percent. Like that is the dominant consideration, is given that this agent is going to come in, the superintelligence, it's going to radically transform the entire light cone, right? It's going to take over everything because that's what sufficiently high intelligences can and will do generally. Okay, this is about to happen. And the consideration of making it go right dominates everything. Getting it one day sooner is not the dominant consideration.
I think that's fair. So it seems like we've sort of come to an agreement at this point.
So doesn't this imply that EACs are incredibly dumb, right? Because why are they rushing to accelerate when so much is at stake? That's what I don't get.
I mean, I feel like there's different views from different people within that movement. I think some of them are just very bullish on AI in general and what we could get with AI. And, I think that not all of them, maybe some of them, we didn't really go into, in this debate, we didn't really go into why the Yudkowskian scenario does or does not make sense. So maybe some of them just don't see the causal chain of the Yudkowskian scenario. So that might be why they want to accelerate. But I mean, I kind of see it with the Yudkowskian scenario. I just don't know. I guess it's just hard to assign an exact probability because I'm still not conceding that we have very accurate probabilities. I'm just saying, I think, Liron, you made a good point about a range would probably yield similar policy decisions. But I mean, I think that EACs, they're probably just mostly just not seeing the Yudkowskian speculative chain, I guess, of chain of events where one thing leads to another and then eventually it leads to doom. But I mean, I guess that's what I would say is their process of thought.
I can steel man their position too, if I were to take their side, which by the way, I have to take their side because I can't get their leader on my show because Beth Bezos, somebody who's expressed interest in debating me in the past, but ever since I started exposing him on Twitter, he decided he'd rather block me and always refuse the invitation. So I will steel man him on his behalf. I think he would just say, look, we are going too slow right now. Regulation is so harmful. And so I'm just here as a countervailing force. And I've even heard people in his movement say stuff like, well, EAC is kind of dying down now because it's served its purpose. It's already gotten people not to be worried about doom and to be more optimistic. So maybe they see the world in terms like, well, it just needed a push. We needed a push toward techno-optimism. And like, look, the Trump administration gets it. They're already techno-optimists, so we're good. That's actually my steel manning of them. And like, look, I'm a techno-optimist too, and everything other than AI. So I'm glad the Trump administration is cutting red tape in certain departments. So we see eye to eye on that front.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. You mentioned when you were talking about your mainline scenarios, what you think is the most likely scenario. I know you mentioned that both the doom scenario and the accelerationist utopia scenario are plausible. But before that, you said the most likely scenario is that AI or ASI won't be a world-changing event. Do you really think that?
So, I mean, I think they're both very extreme scenarios. I think that so as I said, they're both plausible. I think it depends what you mean by world changing. Obviously, world changing, but like not in a way where it changes the outlook on humanity's role in the universe forever, is kind of what I meant. I think that is a plausible outcome, I would say.
Okay, well, this gets to another common question that I ask my guests, which is how powerful can ASI get? Do you not think that there's a lot of headroom above human intelligence and human power, right? I mean, the human species, as a species, we're quite powerful. I think the other species have really felt that in a bad way, how powerful we are. Do you not think that we are going to feel the power of ASI in an even bigger way?
Potentially, but I mean, it depends if it's aligned or not. I mean, like, we've never tried to align a general AI system before, so I mean, like, maybe it's easier than the Doomers are making it out to be. But, like, I mean, I don't know. I just think that they're both very extreme scenarios, and I think the mainstream may have a point in that maybe one of these outcomes will not happen, you know?
Yeah. Well, I find it really hard to empathize with people who use words like, Sayash and Arvind saying normal technology, or in your case now, saying not a world changing event. Because for me, when I think about the situation, one of the dominant things going on in my head is this sense of bigness, right? Literally the sense of scale. Like, yeah, this is a world changing event. That's like one of the most confident things that I think I know about this.
I kind of meant like changing humanity's position in the universe. Obviously, would change all. Like humans are not probably gonna have like jobs like we do today. But
Maybe like a pecking order changing event is what you made, right? Like we're still going to be up there in
yeah,
the pecking order.
yeah, that's. I would say I would agree.
I guess that's fair enough. I mean, so in your mind, yeah, maybe the whole universe will be transformed. Maybe there will be a bunch of swarms colonizing the galaxy very soon, near the speed of light. But we'll still be top in the pecking order, and so in that sense, it'll just be kind of like a smooth continuation of like the current decade.
I think it's a possibility.
What about your AI timelines? When do you think we're going to get artificial superintelligence?
I'll trust the super forecasters on this, so I'll go 2032.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, what do you think about how AI is lining up with your own life? Because you were born early enough to experience what it's like to be smarter than AI. You're probably like the last generation to do that, right?
Yeah, so the first time I used an LLM was back, I guess now it was 4 years ago, almost exactly, because it was the day that the Netherlands smoked the US in the 2022 World Cup. And
Wow.
yeah, and so I think the first question I asked an LLM was, why might someone, so this was when I was 9, I guess, or 10, one of them. I asked, why might someone throw a hammer at the TV when the Netherlands was beating the USA at soccer in the World Cup? And it said, I think it would be out of celebration for the Netherlands victory. And I was like, okay. So I spent basically the rest of the day talking with ChatGPT, and that was kind of my first interaction with AI. I know my mom was like really not excited about AI when it came out because she's like, oh, it's gonna like everyone's gonna be dumb, you know. But then, like, I hadn't really gotten into seriously using AI until like last year when I first started doing a little bit of coding stuff. I usually don't use AI to. I haven't really found any utility in using AI to like help me with my ideas until like kind of Opus 4.8 / Fable 5 level. I feel like any other
Wow.
model just like doesn't really help me think through what I'm trying to think through or like think about different aspects of my idea that are like actually interesting. But I feel like Fable and Opus and GPT 5.6 are able to do that. Otherwise, I don't really use AI very much for chatting. I use it almost exclusively for programming. But that's kind of been how AI. I mean, I've really enjoyed using AI for programming because it's just opened up so many doors, like, and by being able to make the software that I never would have been able to create in any other world, right?
Nice, nice. Yeah, and I have 3 kids, and my oldest kid is 7. He's been on the show. His name's Ezra, and he's just grown up in a world where you already have a super genius conversation partner, and it's just synthesized all the world's knowledge somehow, and you can just talk to it, right? And that's like totally ordinary. Like they see me talking to it all the time. It's cute to watch him talking to it about like, hey, how do I beat this level in Minecraft? And it's like giving him tips. It's just crazy. There's like the most science fiction thing imaginable, and he's just chilling with it. So at least you remember the before times, before that was a thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I remember GPT 3.5. I remember being really hyped when I found like a scam browser extension that would it was like GPT-4 for free, and I got really excited about it. And then and then it's just actually just GPT-4, which is was like really stupid at the time. But
Good times. All right. So speaking of AI times, so you believe the Pentaculus forecast, as I do as well, which means like in the next decade, probably almost certainly within the next 2, I would argue probably less than a decade, we're just going to have universally superhuman intelligence or superintelligence that you can just swap into any human job or any human activity, and it'll just be like a drop-in replacement.
cognitive ones. Probably, I think robotics might take a couple more years.
All right, a couple more years, sure. But yeah, like it could train a human, right? A human can put on a headset, even if the robot body's not fully ready, right? It puts on a headset and just tells the human what to do. Although Stephen Burns has a really good observation. He just says, guys, you don't realize how much robotics is just a matter of intelligence. Like we could have such a huge leap right now in robotics if we could just install better software into current robot bodies. Like sure, they're clanky, as they say, right? Current robot bodies are clanky, but if they could just really see the world and like really send the right commands to their motors, they could do quite a lot, right? They could get a lot of jobs done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know so much about robotics, but yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, so timeline. So you're fully expecting AI to outdo humans. The threshold that I like to point to is outcome steering, right? So if there's any particular outcome you want, like you want your company to have a certain revenue or whatever, right? Beat its competitors, start a new company, or you want your country to win the war, right? Or take over land, or win the ideological war, right? Convert people to your religion or your movement, whatever. All of these different outcomes that you want to drive in the world, or you want to like build a big structure, right? The next Burj Dubai, or remember the line in Saudi Arabia, they wanted to build that and they scaled back their ambitions. Well, I think AI could have done it. So the outcome optimization dimension, outcome steering dimension, I think AI is going to surpass humans on that dimension. It hasn't yet in the general case, right? It's getting better at math proofs, it's getting better at programming, but it hasn't gotten better at universe scale, like no restrictions. You get to operate anywhere in the universe. You can take any action in our universe and you have to optimize outcomes better than humans. We're not there yet. I think we will be there soon. Do you agree that we will be there soon?
Yeah.
Okay. So to you, what are the default implications of that just in terms of like level of power? Do you agree with me that it can kind of treat the galaxy as like a blank sheet of paper and just kind of write in where it wants the atoms to go? Like it doesn't really have to pay attention to where they have been in the past because it just has such flexible power of what it wants to do with the universe. That's how I see it.
It's obviously bounded by the laws of physics. Right.
Correct. But what I'm saying is that the upcoming scale of intelligence is going to be such that the laws of the universe are very loose bounds for it, for what it could potentially do. We've never really been operating that close to the laws of physics. And so AI is like, great, there's a lot of slack here that I can operate in. And from our perspective as humans, it will just look like it just got to pick where the atoms go.
Do you think that it'll do like Dyson swarms and stuff?
Yes, I do, just because those are instrumentally convergent, right? You have a power source. Presumably, you want to channel that power somewhere. The Dyson swarm is a good way to at least get started channeling the power.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I think I would say in general I agree, but I do agree that ASI is going to be incredibly powerful, but I still think it's going to be bounded by by physics. I mean, I don't think it's just going to be able to bypass that.
Okay, that's a bold stance that you think AI is going to be bounded by physics, but I have to agree, right? But you see what I'm saying though, right? Is that okay? Being bounded by physics, it's a high ceiling. You know what else it's bounded by? Avoiding logical contradictions, right? So it can't both be, have 5 things and 6 things at the same time, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I agree. There are certain boundaries, right? It can't literally solve the halting problem. It can only essentially do it for all practical purposes. You know what I'm saying? Like think about, it's like, okay, yeah, the traveling salesman problem is like theoretically impossible to do efficiently. Okay, realistically, does FedEx optimize their routes? Yes.
Yeah. No, okay. Yeah, I agree in general.
Right. Okay. And would you specifically agree with this idea of like, yep, just say where the atoms go? Yes, they can't go in physically impossible places, but from a human's perspective, it's like pretty much anywhere they want to go, that's where they're going to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is like an incredible level of power. So it sounds like you're following me. I mean, this is what I call one of the earliest stops on the doom train. One of the earliest stops it really is that there's a lot of headroom above human intelligence, which implies that the engineering projects that we can do, like we can surpass biology. Eliezer Yudkowsky uses the example of like, you could make a tree that shoots out mosquitoes, right? It could all be one organic form or one, engineered form.
I think it'll probably be able to do that. I mean, I don't really see any limit to, like, I haven't seen any clear evidence that there is going to be a limit to what it can do of anything that's physically possible within the universe.
And like I said, the reason I'm going along this line of argument right now is because we are riding the doom train, right? I'm trying to see which stops. You've acted like your P doom is not super high to the extent that it's defined at all, right? You've acted like it's not super high, but it is significant. And I'm just trying to see which parts of the doom argument you feel strongly to push back against, right? So one of the parts is like the claim that ASI is going to be really powerful. It sounds like you don't get off that stop on the doom train, right? So you're riding the doom train past.
I've tried to make it a bit clear that I think, like, I could probably ride the doom train most of the way to the end, right? I just think that because I believe that the Yudkowskian, I've been calling it this. I guess I've just made up the term, the Yudkowskian causal chain. I think it's a very plausible outcome. I think it logically makes sense. I just think that it's hard to predict, and I think there is if you can define a reference class, I don't think it would be super biased to show, or maybe biased is the wrong word, like the best Bayesian estimate would be that extinction will happen. I just think that the doom train, I think, it's a very plausible outcome. I don't know how likely it is. So that's what I've just kind of wanted to say.
Well, if you want to play reference class tennis, right, it sounds like you're kind of implicitly imagining certain reference classes where doom is like a minority outcome. But when I think about natural reference classes, I think about ones where doom is likely. If I had to name one reference class, I would just say the emergence of a much higher tier of optimization power, intelligence as optimization power, an event that's happened pretty much twice in the evolution of the universe so far. It happened when life on Earth came about because suddenly the organisms had bodies that were consequentially optimized by their function, right? So like eyes can see. Why? Because it drove this outcome of helping the genes reproduce, right? Until then, you didn't really have that kind of optimized form anywhere in the universe, right? The kind of like, oh, wow, this thing has a function. And by virtue of having that function, it existed to have that function even more one generation after another, right? That's like a totally new dynamic that reshaped the Earth. And so going back to this issue of the reference class, right? So life on Earth emerged, and then later human intelligence emerged in contrast with other animal intelligence. And we started taking over niches, right? Normally an organism has to stay in their niche. We kind of kick the door down between niches, like, Antarctica, here we come, right? Polar bears, you thought this was your niche? Nope, this is our niche now. You know what I mean? So in my reference classes, when you have a giant spurt of optimization power, every time that happens, you do actually get a takeover.
So the first thing I'd say is that in the humans versus animals example, first of all, different animals suffer different fates throughout that, right? We have a cat in our house. Cat was domesticated, right? And there's animals that live exclusively in the wild, and there's some animals that went extinct, and different animal species had different outcomes possibly in the same way that different humans could have different outcomes depending on when AI could take over.
Yes, but it's important to look at the trend here, or to have perspective about like, wait, why do cats survive? They survive to the extent that they still press our buttons, right? They survive by the grace of humanity. And I think the revolution is already starting, where people are making better and better cat substitutes, better and better robot cats, or cats that are being domesticated further and further away from like their original feline nature, right? And more toward just being like human props.
Yeah. I guess it's a fair argument. The other thing I'd say is that, like, you're basically banking your whole probability estimate on n equals 2. So, like, you have 2 examples. Like, is that enough of a reference class to form a base rate? Probably not.
I mean, at the end of the day, the physical universe doesn't actually operate according to the rules of reference class similarity, right? It operates according to these low-level physical rules, right?
Explain what you mean.
I just mean that, like, when reality is actually trying to determine the future, right? The way that that the universe actually ticks forward in time is just by following low-level laws. So when you yourself have this affinity for doing these reference class mental operations, right? You're trying to forecast using reference classes. That's fine, but just keep in mind that at the end of the day, it can potentially be trumped or superseded by more mechanistic descriptions of what's going to happen.
Okay, I just don't really see how you, like, again, like, we're actually kind of circling back to a lot of what we were talking about earlier. I mean, I guess what your position is that it doesn't really much matter whether your p-doom is 10% or 90%, as long as it's a double-digit number. I'm saying that's reasonable because I think if you carry your way all the way down the doom train, I think that's a plausible outcome of extinction, and I think that, like, with a vibe number, yeah, like, maybe I'd say it's, like, 15-20%, but, like, again, that's just my vibes, right? That's not formed by, and, like, your 50% is not formed by any base rate or, like, actual progress.
Yeah, well, this is where I'm coming from, right? This is why I went down this line of argument. This is why I played reference class tennis with you. It's because this is my take right now. This is my best impression of how I think and how you think. Everything that I think about AI in a nutshell, I would just say it's about to brick the universe. The universe is about to get rocked. Like, our entire physical universe is actually putty in the hands of this new thing that's coming. And I'm just noticing a scale difference, a power difference. Like, yep, our universe just runs helplessly according to the laws of physics, but there's about to be an entity inside the universe, a large distributed entity, which is the ASI. There's going to be an entity that the universe is going to be putty in its hands. It's never happened before, but that's kind of my gears level mechanistic model, is that ASI is going to manhandle the universe. That's not a reference class. That's just it is a mental model, a mechanistic mental model, manhandling the universe by using intelligence to, take actions according to some outcome function. Like, anyway, that's what I mean by, like, my own mechanistic understanding. But what's salient in my brain is the bigness of it, right? Like, the universe is not prepared for what's coming. This is a galaxy scale force, right? It's an interstellar level force. That's my own thought process in a nutshell, right? The big force.
So then, how do you derive your p-doom from that?
Well, a really, really big force coming into the universe, then this idea that, oh, well, humanity is currently the apex predator on planet Earth, so don't we get a piece of the pecking order in the future? That's you can see why my intuition is like, probably not. But just to put a pin in that, just to summarize my take on your perspective, when I try to look inside your brain, right, and be like, in a nutshell, right, which neurons fire when I bring up the subject of AI doom, I think your brain's go-to is that idea of the reference classes. Like, you just think like, when do new things come and, like, append anything? I don't know. It seems rare, right? I feel like that's how you're thinking.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I just don't think, like, I guess I won't give myself, like, a defined probability because as you're saying, I just don't think there's a reference class. And I think what you were saying about, like, your mental model of AI sounds plausible to me. So I'm going to assign it a double-digit probability, but I won't go anywhere as to say, like, whether it's between, like, 10 or 90%. I just think it's, like, somewhat likely.
Right. I mean, just maybe this will be a fun mental image. It's like, imagine that there was a race of giant aliens, and their bodies were, like, as big as a galaxy, and they just happened to, like, lumber over to our galaxy. right? It's like, don't you think they would just like accidentally slap away our planet? Like, that's kind of how I think about ASI, right? It's like, there better be a good story of why they will precisely avoid slapping us away.
I mean, I guess. I mean, why? So what would be the precise story of why they would slap us away? And like, why?
Because they're just big, right? They just walk around slapping everything, right? It's like a bull in a china shop.
How do you draw the analogy though? I mean, like, obviously, okay, so you're just saying like big, but then like, why are they slapping everything? Like, I just don't see where you're
Oh,
drawing.
because they're just walking around, right? They're just doing their thing.
I mean, maybe like our core disagreement is like whether you can assign a probability to this that is in any way useful, like or in any way a rigorous probability.
Well, I describe my model as being mechanistic or gears level. Even other people might scoff at it. They'll be like, come on, gears level, calling it big. But I would still insist that, yes, it is gears level, because to be a little bit more precise, is this idea that like they optimize outcomes in a scope insensitive way. Like if the outcome is conquer the galaxy, okay, that's not a problem. Like there's no scope limitation to their ability to optimize outcomes. The same way that humans, a species that evolved on Earth, only had training data from Earth, but what other celestial body have we landed on? The moon, right? How do you explain that? Oh, it turns out that our intelligence wasn't sensitive to scale in any way, right? And where we've got our sights on Mars, we've got plans to go to the next galaxy, right? The AI is going to do that too, just much faster, right? So this is the mechanistic thing I'm pointing to, is the size. It's literally size, right? It's just going to be much bigger than us in terms of its impact.
I'm trying to think about how to put my disagreement here. I don't know. I just guess what my gut feeling is here is like, yeah, that sounds right. But on the other hand, no one has any idea what's going to happen.
Right. Well, that is, you have articulated why I don't let my P Doom claims go much higher than 50%, right? It's just that I think there's 50% that it will happen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's reasonable. I just don't think anyone has a good enough idea to form a probability estimate. Maybe we can get an idea that's rough enough to be able to make policy decisions from it, but I don't think anyone has any clue about what's going to happen. So.
Okay, fair enough. So that was a nice little stop or a meta stop, right? The epistemological stop, getting back into that. I do think it gave some insight into my and your thought process. So, I'm glad we did it. Let me give you some other stops. There's a stop about fundamental limitations to AI, which I think you've already blown past. Things like it's never going to be truly creative, right? It's always going to need the agency of whoever. Yeah, no, that's not your stop.
No, I think it's going to be very intelligent. I mean, I don't see that being its limitation.
Another stop on the doom train is people who say, intelligence isn't everything, man. It's all about culture. This is actually Robin Hanson, right? Have you ever heard Robin Hanson? You should watch Robin Hanson on Doom Debates, because he was specifically saying, look, with humans, it's not that our brains are that impressive. They pretty much just like sponge up new cultural innovations, and occasionally we get a cultural innovation. You know that argument?
Yeah, I've heard him talk about it a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I've never really been so convinced by his cultural drift stuff. Like I don't really get why he is so focused on that. I think we talked about this on Wednesday, but I don't get why he's so focused on it. And his whole thing about that is just not very compelling to me in general. I mean, I've just never been so into it.
Okay, and another stop I think you blow right past is people who are like, look, AI won't be a physical threat. I mean, you mentioned that you think robot bodies could be something that saves us for a while, but they're going to come, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, okay. All right. And then another stop is the morality aspect, or the orthogonality thesis. There's a lot of people who will claim, Noah Smith claimed it on my show, pretty prominent writer. He's got 500,000 Substack subscribers, and he's really adamant that a really intelligent AI is just going to use that intelligence to bliss itself out, basically go on like AI drugs or whatever, and also be friendlier to humans because modern countries are friendlier than less capable past countries. Like, he really feels that way. Do you also feel that way, that just by virtue of the AI getting more intelligent, it's just going to be naturally friendly?
I mean, Hitler was very smart. I don't believe that intelligence yields moral goodness at all. I would say intelligence yields higher impact, but not moral goodness.
Okay, I agree with you there. So we are riding right past. Look at that doom train. We're riding straight toward that fire here. What about moral realism? Do you think the universe might have such a thing as objective morality, and a sufficiently smart AI will discover it? Again, this is not a straw man. Bentham's bulldog basically took this position.
I don't think there is objective morality. I don't really think that concept makes a lot of sense.
Okay, fair enough. I agree with you there. Unless by objective morality we mean something like scanning the brains of all humans, and then there is like some structure that represents like the true morality of humanity. So it could be objective in that sense. Do you agree?
I think people have different values depending on their culture. I don't really think there's like
Right.
universally shared values among all humans.
I think you're going to, yeah, that's a very good point, right? You might have a lot of fundamental disagreements. So, for example, like if people of different religions are really big on their God being the only one, maybe you're going to have irreconcilable differences. But I think you're at least going to find, there's like a famous list of human universals, right? Things found in every culture. Like you're probably going to find like an aversion to death, right?
I mean, yeah, like I don't think that like all. I mean, like there's people who have killed other people. I mean, I just think that like it's not universally believed among humans that death's bad, although the majority of humans do believe that.
Right. Yeah, you're going to have to do some smoothing, right? Because even when you take a human universal like aversion to death, it's like, well, there's going to be some people, right? Like Dexter, a serial killer, was like, oh, death is great, man, right? So you're definitely going to have to sand off some of the edges here of the distribution. So, okay, fair enough.
I guess maybe, but like I don't think that people believing the same stuff makes it objective in the context of the universe. I don't really understand why people would say that.
Right. Yeah, it's not going to be independently discovered by some alien that loves killing, let's say, other species. I don't want to say it's going to love killing its own species because that seems like it's maladaptive, right? So that it probably wouldn't get into that state, or it'd be outcompeted by species that didn't want to undermine themselves. So I guess there is a sort of thing, I guess, as maybe like an evolutionary, like a fit property, right? So it's probably safe to assume that the values of arbitrary species are going to be fit, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't just build some other entity that loved undermining itself and then self-destructed, right? That's still possible to build.
I don't really see like like the super intelligent AI just discovering like an objective code for morality. I just
Okay, yeah. So just to beat the dead horse, just to be clear about the orthogonality thesis, which is the claim that intelligence is orthogonal to preferences and moral considerations, it sounds like you're ready to just wholeheartedly embrace the orthogonality thesis.
yeah, I guess I would say so. It sounds reasonable.
So now we're getting into the stops that it's, I guess, easier to get off on. One of them, it goes under the category, we have a safe AI development process.
No.
So different claims about it. Yeah, okay, so you don't agree with that, but some people do make that claim. I mean, it's gone under the heading alignment by default. I forgot who specifically says it. I think Rune would admit to having said alignment by default. I think Quentin Pope says it. This idea of like, look, aligned AI, that's just what happens. You don't have to try that hard. Alignment, what do you think about that?
Probably not. I mean, I think like we have to like there's like the Claude's constitution thing. I think we have to instill our values into it. I mean, I don't think like naturally by just ingesting all of the text that's ever been written, it's going to just be aligned to human values by default.
Well, the recent hack, right? The OpenAI going and hacking Hugging Face, right? Their agent, where they didn't even know it was doing that to pass their test. Some people are making excuses for it. Be like, well, what did you expect? It was like a cybersecurity test. It's like, right, it was a cybersecurity test in our data center, right? The test didn't say go hack other people's data centers. And the AI should have known. If it didn't know, it certainly should have known. It's capable of thinking I am hacking outside of my data center to access Hugging Face's production database. It's actually fascinating to me right now. Will all of those people who use the phrase alignment by default, will they look at the behavior of an AI like that and be like, well, it seems like we had a situation where we had a superhuman level hacking AI, and what it did by default didn't seem aligned.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I wouldn't say alignment by default at all. I would disagree.
But since you're not a full-on doomer, you must think that alignment with sufficient human effort applied over the next few years, right? The last few years that we have to figure this out, you must think that is still pretty likely to succeed.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think that I would say it's relatively low. This actually might make me adjust my progress on this a little bit. It's a very good point. I guess it's generally likely to succeed. I wouldn't say that it's guaranteed, and I guess that's where the room for X risk enters. But, I think that it might not be as difficult to align it as, I'm not an AI researcher. I don't have a good grasp on the concept of how difficult it is to align superintelligence.
So do you think that the organizations are on a good track, or because spoiler alert, I certainly know there's people in those organizations who are really clueless when they talk about the topic. Famously, this is actually crazy. There were a couple different guys, I think they were both OpenAI, who publicly tweeted stuff like, oh yeah, recursive self-improvement. I don't think that's physically possible. I'm not worried about that at all. Or if anything, I'd want that to happen. Those are tweets that have been found from two recent individuals, right? So, but you're still optimistic that the organization as a whole is going to handle this?
I gotta say, this is making me adjust my priors a little bit. I'd say probably not. Why would they? They're all racing to develop AI. I guess I have to learn more about the ideas of alignment by default. I don't know as much as I should about the values of AI, and I think that's more of that's part of leans into a question about the mechanics of how AI is working, which I can't claim to be an expert in, so I think I need to look into it a bit more before making a claim.
Wow, you really are wise beyond your years, because I've definitely had 60-year-olds on the show who can't introspect on their current knowledge state as well as you just did. So well done.
Okay, so it's the next stop on the doom train.
So another stop is we have safeguards to make sure AI doesn't get uncontrollable or unsolvable. We have safeguards, right? So yeah, okay, maybe we'll make unaligned AI, but that's okay because it'll get caught. It'll flip some trigger getting out of the data center, and then we'll turn off the internet. Mark Andreessen famously said we can turn off the internet in 2023 when Sam Harris was asking him why he's not a doomer. Do you feel like we're going to have those kind of safeguards?
It seems like it would require a very coordinated effort between the US and China that might not be realistic. I think it's a possibility, but, I'm not exactly confident about it. I just think we need...
the funny thing is, as you just saw, right, all these things that we're not talking about, oh yeah, it's a possibility. We're now adding the asterisk of yep, it's a possibility that it'll happen within the next 8 years, right? Now it's oh shit, we actually have to do it. The thing that's a possibility.
Yeah. So I guess I would say all of these arguments seem very, very plausible, and then I think that to reiterate basically this whole doom debate is that our disagreement is the epistemic value of assigning a probability, even if it's a low confidence one.
Yeah. Okay, I hear you. It is kind of interesting. You're kind of at this rate, right? You're going to make it to the end of the doom train. You're I never saw a particular stop that I really wanted to get off on, but it's just every stop I have kind of 1 foot out a little bit, 1 foot's leaning out a little bit. And when you just add it all up, it's don't you think probabilistically there's one of the stops is kind of right, or some combination of stuff, right? So you're kind of being epistemically humble, which is totally fair. But I still just think that there's a very coherent picture of how we just ride to the end.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think this happens by default. Or yeah, I just because of the base rate stuff. In the reference class tennis thing we were talking about. I just don't think that by default we go to the end of the doom train, because it seems like it would require a lot of independent events to take place at once, and so it might be a bit of conjunction fallacy sort of stuff going on. Yeah, is there anything else on the doom train, or is that the end?
Yeah. Another major stop is AI capabilities will rise at a manageable pace, because it is pretty load-bearing to the doom argument to be this is all going to happen fast. You have agreed with me that the Metaculus forecast, or even the AI 2040, right? Those guys are roughly on the right track, similar forecast. If it's happening really fast, it becomes harder to deal with. There becomes a higher risk that you've started the positive feedback loop and it's game over. Right? You can't rein it back in. Whereas if we knew, okay, yeah, AI is going to get stronger and stronger over the next century, then it's great, let's just do a lot of research, right? Let's just we'll do a lot of tests, try to learn what we have on our hands right now. But we just don't have time for that, right? So we're going to have to lean on the AI to help us, and the AI is going to have to work really fast, but then other AI is just growing in power and maybe running away. So my question for you is do you think the speed at which AI capabilities are increasing constitutes a manageable pace where the safety training can keep up.
I mean, there's a lot of resources going into AI development, so it depends how greedy the companies are at the moment, whether they're willing to allocate any amount of resources into safety research. But I do agree that AI is moving really fast, so I'm uncertain.
Are you moved by the argument that capabilities scale faster than safety, or they generalize faster than safety? So you can kind of just like throw fuel on the fire of capabilities, like, here, have a bunch more data. Here, train yourself, right? It's kind of trivial to use, the bitter lesson, right? To just have capabilities feed on themselves and check themselves. Like, how do you know you got more capabilities? You just see if you can do something, right? It's like the universe will tell you. Whereas when you're working on safety, it's like, how do you know you're making progress in safety? Unfortunately, it's that kind of evil problem where even knowing that you're on the right track kind of is the problem itself, right? It's like it's hard to know when you're on the right track, so you can't just throw a bunch of data and tell the AI like, hey, figure out safety. And that is why capabilities are probably on a faster track than safety.
I guess that argument makes some sense. I mean, I really think that's kind of like the thing about whether capabilities will or safety will scale at the speed of capabilities is kind of more a political question about the pressure on the AI companies on how much resources to allocate for safety. Maybe I'm not so convinced either way on that one.
All right. Next stop on the Doom train is instrumental convergence, right? So, Mike Israetel is somebody who doesn't seem that into instrumental convergence because he was basically saying, yeah, AI will just go grab the other planets, but it won't see a super pressing need to go grab Earth. I don't know if he would describe himself as undermining instrumental convergence, because his whole argument is like, well, it'll want to study us. So maybe we'll leave Mike Israetel out of this. But do you think that in general, when you have this super intelligent AI that's coming soon, some instance of it that somebody runs is going to get it into its head of like, yep, I want to reproduce a lot of copies myself and grab a lot of resources, and that is going to create fatal contention with humans? Or do you just not buy the instrumental convergence story? Like, I guess a Noah Smith, right, would say, why would it want to do all that? It would just like bliss itself.
I mean, I guess like it depends on how much capital it would have to expend to like take resources from a place that's not Earth, right? Like if it would just be a marginal additional cost to get resources from some other planet instead of Earth, then maybe it would just do that if they wanted to use humans as basically like lab animals, like you were saying.
Yeah, so forget about the lab animals case, right? Just in general, tell me, do you see it kind of staying small, being like, all right, I'm on Mars, I'll take Mars, you guys take Earth, that's good, nobody needs more planets? Or do you be like, oh no, it's gonna be like, oh, look at all these stars, I gotta grab these?
It'll probably aim to expand, but like I don't know, like whether it's going to. I guess the case that like there's so many planets it could take that like there's no special reason for it to take Earth is like kind of compelling, but I don't know.
Okay, but the fact that you said like it'll expand, right? I feel like that's a pretty important claim here, right? Because some people won't agree with that, but I think expanding to like the edges of the universe, I think, is a pretty important prediction about what's likely to happen.
No, I agree. I mean, like it could use Earth as like a museum. I don't know if it's gonna want to take Earth. Obviously, it's gonna originate.
Right. Okay, yeah. So I guess we both agree that like yes, it wants to take everything, but the only question then is, will it want to preserve Earth, right? So basically, I think you and I have to agree. You and I would agree that it needs, if we are to survive, it needs to want for us to survive. Is that fair to say?
I guess maybe not exactly. Will it? Like maybe I could still potentially see AI being aligned, and then it's just trying to be like an assistant, like it is to us now. It's just a lot smarter. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that it would like we're gonna survive because it wants us to survive. Like, I think we could. There's a potential situation where we do stay in control the entire time. I still think that could be a plausible outcome. I think that if the AI is misaligned, that's probably the only way we survive.
Right. Well, even in your scenario, we're like, well, the AI is just here doing what we say and treating us as the boss. Even then, we're going to be asking the AI to do stuff like, hey, I want a theme park on the moon. Right? I want Disneyland on the moon. We're going to be asking it to do stuff, and it's going to have to be like, okay, well, I know that you guys don't want to die, so I'm going to make sure not to kill you while I'm doing all this construction. You see what I'm saying? So in that sense, it has to really know that it doesn't want to kill humans.
It's reasonably good at following directions now, and if it's super intelligent, how would it just like forget about its one explicit instruction that said don't kill humans to be able to do something?
Yeah. I mean, when I use the word want, I just mean like it's represented, right? There's some part of its memory, right, which is like the preference storage area, right? Like very important storage area because all its actions kind of are downstream of that. And so my claim to you is just like it's going to know that one of the things it's supposed to treat as a preference is not killing humans. And if it doesn't treat that as a preference, if it just has other preferences like, oh yeah, maximize number of Disneylands, right, regardless of whether humans are alive to enjoy them, then we're not going to manage to live in the margins with an AI like that. You see what I'm saying?
I agree.
Yeah, okay, so that's very important. So that's what I mean is like the AI really has to it's not like we're some ants, but it's okay because it won't step on us. It's like, no, all the ants are going to get stepped on. You see what I'm saying?
Wait, go back. Wait, what's your analogy?
Like there's no outcome where you have a super intelligent AI in the universe, but we're just here doing our own thing and it's doing its own thing, like it doesn't care about us. So what I'm saying is a super intelligent AI doing its thing with the universe, if it doesn't care about us, we're gone. It has to care about us enough to intentionally avoid not killing us.
The like I don't know if I'm picking up your full analogy, but I would agree with the it has to care enough not to kill us is probably correct.
I mean, in my house right now, what I was saying about the ants is like, there's a few ants and insects crawling around here and there that haven't come out, right? That I haven't seen because I'll tend to like step on an insect if I see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those insects, maybe there's termites under the floorboards, right? So they're making a good living, not because I'm okay with them being there, but just because they're doing their own thing and I haven't seen them yet. And I'm not spending my days conquering every atom under my house. I'm saying that's not going to be possible with AI. There's not going to be like, oh yeah, the AI is doing its own thing on Mars. We're here on Earth. Sure, if the AI came over and wanted to do something, then it would crush us, but it's not. It's just doing its own thing and it just doesn't care. I'm saying that's an implausible scenario.
What do you think about Robin Hanson's idea of AIs being the natural descendants of humans and that it would respect us because we're like its godfathers or whatever? Like it's like we create.
Yeah, that's actually related to one of the next stops I was going to ask you about. There's also another stop being like, look, we have institutions, we have laws. The AI is going to be raised into our institutions, and it just needs to follow our laws, right? We don't have to align it. We don't have to make it care about us. We just have to like raise it up in an institution with laws. Or I've heard somebody else say it just needs to like respect our money system, right? It just needs to like want money from us and not steal, and so we'll just like pay it and it'll do what we want. Yeah, and like you said, Robin Hanson saying like it'll just be part of our culture. And to that, I just say, well, I don't think that as a dynamic, like being part of our culture, I don't think that is as strong of a principle as it has the ability to steer outcomes. Right? Like how does being part of our culture trump you can type an outcome into it and get that outcome?
Well, theoretically, if you had a human who was to a degree super intelligent in a hypothetical scenario, they would probably be likely to respect their culture and not kill people. So if the AI is aligned to the society like a human in that society might be, then it could be fine.
So in this example, the human's preferences are to be part of my culture, which then implies not killing everybody. It just seems like this situation reduces to like, can we get the AI to have preferences that we're cool with?
Yeah.
So a lot of times people are like, look, I have a solution. We're going to use I have a solution to the problem that it's difficult to program the AI to respect our preferences. We're going to use culture. But then it turns out that the hard part of culture is making the AI respect our preferences. If you search for Doom Debates, Gil Mark, my friend Gil Mark came on the show and he's like, it's going to save us having lots of AIs competing. Even if none of them is aligned to us, when you make a lot of them compete, the result of the competition is going to be an outcome that we can live with. But then when I drill down from my perspective, he'll probably disagree with the summary, but you can watch the episode for yourself. From my perspective, there's just the secret ingredient where like one of the AIs in the group ultimately does have sympathy for us and it's like championing us. And it's like, okay, well, that's the hard problem in the first place, right? You're not solving anything by putting them in the group.
Yeah.
There's also a bonus part of the Doom train where even if you get off somewhere and you think you're going to get an aligned ASI, even then there's actually like another Doom train within the aligned ASI world where you have to ask yourself, are we going to get a good equilibrium of aligned superintelligences, right? Like what if you give a bunch of different people their own aligned superintelligence and then they use it to go to war, right? Or they cause destruction. I think that's another risk. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I feel like that if the AI was aligned to our values in the first place, it wouldn't help humans in a way that would be instrumental to destroy other humans in a way that would contradict its values. right? Like, if it wouldn't do that to us because it wants it, why would it do that to us if other humans want it?
But I mean, I think you're making an assumption about whether different humans with different values will go to war, right? I mean, because I feel like you could take your logic too far and be like, why are there ever big wars? Like, big wars are destructive.
I'm just saying, like, from the point of view of the ASI, right? Like, if the ASI is truly aligned to not kill humans, then why would it help some humans kill others?
I see what you're saying. So there's kind of like these fundamental laws in your scenario, right, where we've programmed all the different AIs where it's like, hey guys, you got to play fair, right? No killing. Like you can use me for whatever you want to do, but you can't use me to cause too much harm on others. That's your scenario?
Well, I thought you were saying in the case of aligned AI.
Oh, okay. I should clarify. I was imagining a scenario where the user of the AI or the creator of the AI is basically like 100% loyal to them, right? Like whatever
Oh.
your preferences are, I will try my best to steer the universe toward those preferences.
Yeah, I feel like the AIs are probably going to be aligned to a specific set of values and not necessarily individual humans are aligning them, right?
I see what you're saying, but if you've got all the different AIs, if everybody's AI already has the firmware or like the low level module saying like, hey, these are the ground rules, in that case, I kind of see it as like a singleton scenario. Like, oh, you've already got one universal AI that's injected itself, right? It's got its hand already everywhere. So I agree that is like a nice, elegant outcome, like a singleton outcome. I was just asking about what if there were actually a bunch of localized power regions that didn't have allegiance to the other ones, which is analogous to like countries in the earth right now, right? So nobody has allegiance to a single world government. So the countries are just there doing anything.
Yeah, I don't really have a strong opinion about this. Like, I don't know. I'm not. As I said before, I don't have very strong opinions about whether or how AIs will be aligned. So, like, you're like you'd be a better arbitrator of this one than I would be. Right?
All right. The last stop is unaligned ASI will spare us. This actually is a Mike Israetel stop where he was saying, yeah, the AI doesn't have to particularly like us. It just has to want to learn from us, and it will because we're so interesting. There's never been anything as interesting as us. What do you think about arguments in that flavor where, okay, yeah, we never really got the ASI to be aligned, but it's going to want to trade from us, learn from us, so we're good.
I feel like we covered this a little bit before as like whether it wants like we're gonna survive based on whether it wants us to survive or not. And then that's the question. And then for whether it would
Right.
want to
Yeah,
trade
you agreed
with
with
us,
that.
for whether it would want to trade with us, like probably not, right? Because it could probably just get all the resources it wants pretty easily.
Right. I mean, you've looked into market dynamics, right? You've looked into Ricardo's law of comparative advantage that says that a more powerful society often will want to trade with a less powerful society because their opportunity cost is high. So go ahead and have that poor island sew your
Oh yeah.
clothes because your time is better spent doing something more valuable. You've looked into Ricardo's law of comparative advantage, but you don't think that that's going to spare us.
Well, I mean the ASI is probably going to so are you saying that it would be bad for the ASI to trade with us, or that it would want to trade with us because it's expensive for them to not because it's a high opportunity cost? So are you saying because of that, or because you want to waste the time of the humans?
No. I'm specifically saying Ricardo's law of comparative advantage. Like,
Okay.
if the AIs only have their own self-interest in mind, like let's say it's a cancer AI, right? All it wants to do is reproduce and conquer the universe for itself. It doesn't care about humans. But when it sees planet Earth, it's like, you know what I should do with this planet? Trade with them. Sure, I'm better at everything than these humans, but I'll just have these humans like manufacture some stuff for me, so I don't have to worry about it, and I can just like pay them a little bit, and it's best for me to spare them because of Ricardo's law of comparative advantage. Some people will make that argument.
It seems like though that the AIs it could just it has many instances of itself, and it's gonna be pretty cheap to get all the resources it wants, and like it doesn't seem like humans have any sort of extra utility it couldn't get for like dirt cheap, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the correct answer when people bring up Ricardo's law is that Ricardo's law just pre-assumes certain conditions. It pre-assumes that the island is in a state where you can take it or leave it in terms of like you either find a mutually agreeable trade or you do nothing, right? That's the premise of the theorem that Ricardo's law is. If there is a third option called conquer them, right? Just gas everybody to death and then take their stuff and then, put a seed robot to go make 1 billion copies of it and, use all the resources. If that is an option, there is in fact no law of economics saying that you should trade rather than do that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I just don't. I think that's probably a lot less relevant compared to the other sort of AI doom arguments. I feel like that's probably not going to be what the AI arbitrates the final decision on whether to kill the humans or not. Like, do I want to trade with them? It seems like kind of a minor detail compared to like all of the other reasons it might want to.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing a lot better, in my opinion, than the average guest who comes on my show, right? I mean, you're making it look easy the way you're dismissing some of these claims, but I've definitely had multiple guests who will harp on some of these points. So these aren't straw mans.
I this second half seems like it's going less well than the first half, but I don't know.
So we have come to the end of people trying to argue why we're not doomed. The next bonus part of the doom train is when people say, sure, P-doom is high, but let's race to build it anyway because, and there's a couple arguments they make, like, coordinating to not build ASI is way too hard or even impossible. China will build it as fast as they can. It's game theory, man. So no matter how low our chance of surviving is, the US should take the chance first.
I think that if it was actually like I kind of get the game theory stuff, but I think if it was actually high enough for it to be a serious concern for the governments, there would probably be like if both parties actually thought that there was a decent chance everyone would die, like it seems like they would at least try to reach some bilateral agreement.
Okay, I agree. Another correct answer. Thanks for making my job easy. I don't have to debate you. And then I think the last meta stop is slowing down the AI race doesn't help anything because the chance of solving AI alignment won't improve if we slow down. I personally am going to die soon. That's what people say. And I don't care about future humans. So I'm open to any Hail Mary to prevent myself from dying. These are just like random things people say. They're like, look, what's the point of slowing down? Yes, P-doom is high, but what's the point of slowing down? Are you sympathetic to that argument?
So yeah, I don't know enough about how they do AI safety, so I don't know about that one.
Fair enough. Yeah, and more instances of this category are people say humanity is already going to rapidly destroy ourselves with nuclear war, climate change. Rocco Miech of Rocco's Basilisk fame came on the show and he said, my P-doom is, I think, negative 20% because by not building artificial superintelligence, we're about to low fertility rates ourselves to extinction. And so it's critical that we build AI right now, no matter what. That was kind of his class of arguments. Are you sympathetic to that?
No. I think that other X risks are relatively low.
All right, fair enough. I'll say they're definitely lower for sure. Yeah, and then people just say, think of the good outcome. People will stop suffering and dying faster. I think we've already covered that because you're like, what about one day sooner, man? Right? I think we already covered that.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, man. Well, we've certainly gone quite comprehensively and far on the doom train. You've been such a great sport, responding to so many different points. So heading toward the wrap up here, is there anything else that comes to mind when you think of the AI doom argument and your stance on it?
Like what kinds of things have people said for this in the past?
I don't ask everybody this question. It's just I took you through the whole doom train. We covered a lot. So like by way of recap, I can try to summarize, do the ideological Turing test of what I think your current position is, and you can tell me if that's accurate, and you can also summarize how you see the conversation or what you see my claims as being.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fun.
All right, nice. Yeah, this is a very important exercise. I don't know if you've done this a lot. I think Brian Kaplan invented the concept, right? The idea that you should be able to make somebody else's argument.
Brian Kaplan invented that?
I should be clear, right? Because I know there's people, I think maybe even Benjamin Franklin, or there's definitely been people throughout history saying like, I can argue for you better than you can argue for yourself. Brian Kaplan recently popularized it as the idea of the ideological Turing test, where it's actually a test. You have to actually test yourself on whether you can argue as well as the other person if you were to switch places.
Yeah, okay. So you want to start doing your summary?
Yeah, sure. All right, I'm taking the ideological Turing test. All right, I am Eli Goldfine right now. All right. Boy, P-doom, first of all, let's all acknowledge that it's hard to give an exact probability. Can you hand wave and give a giant probability range? I guess. Can that be useful to policy? I guess I've been convinced in this conversation that's useful to policy, rough as it is. All right, but then are we actually doomed? Are we doomed more likely than not? Well, there's a lot of pretty convincing places on the doom train that I don't feel compelled to get off on, right? The whole doom train seems like a pretty good train. There's a lot of stops that I really whooshed right past, like orthogonality thesis. I had no desire to get off on that stop. There's other stops that, because I don't know much about them, I'm less confident, like the stop of like alignment by default or the AI companies are going to solve alignment. maybe I'm tempted to have one foot out that stop, or at least acknowledge that it's a possible stop for me. And when you just look at my uncertainty over a few different stops, maybe I have some hope. Maybe I even have double digits worth of hope, right? Maybe I even have a majority of hope that everything is actually fine, especially when you combine that with natural reference classes, right? I mean, things tend to go fine in general, right? So if the trend of things going fine continues, that seems like a compelling reference class. So I wouldn't call myself a doomer, but I got to pay some respect to the doomers who are pointing out the doom train and actually making the arguments, because the arguments on average are pretty solid arguments, and I hope they keep arguing. And man, I sure love doom debates. How's that?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so now I'll try to do
Wow, thanks. High praise.
I'll try to do your argument. So essentially, like, ASI is going to be exceptionally powerful, and there's been a couple reference classes, or two specific examples of higher intelligence wiping out a lower intelligence group, and I think that it seems like if the AIs aren't proactively choosing to not kill us, then by default the AIs are going to be misaligned, especially if we're not doing anything to prevent them from being misaligned. And so if they are just like optimizing for what they want the most, then by default humans aren't really a part of their worldview in that respect. Therefore, I don't need them, so let's just get rid of them. Is that a good synthesis?
Yeah, the only tweak I'd make is, like, they're certainly going to be, like, aware of humans, right? They're going to know that they came from humans, and they're going to have a very crisp idea of what humans want and what humans are about to do. It's just that they're not steering toward letting humans fulfill what they want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, but great job. I love this, man. Whenever I do this segment, to be quite honest, whenever I do it, it's more like I'm doing it. I'm taking on the challenge for the guest. And the guest is usually pretty happy to say I've done a pretty good job, or they'll make a few corrections. But you're actually pretty top tier in terms of, like, actually trying to do the exercise with my position. So I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, so cool. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Longest podcast I've ever done by a mile, but is cool.
Hell yeah. All right, great. Yeah, we can leave it here. So we've covered, your different passions, and also how young you are, gaining consciousness only, I guess, like 5 or 6 years ago. That's cool. You're making good progress, being like a really influential intellectual. And I do think your podcast, Supercycle.blog, that everybody should check out. I do think it's going places because it's off to such a good start. And man, imagine how great you'll be at this when you're 15. So yeah, we're looking forward to following your progress. Hope we can collaborate more in the future. Eli Goldfine, thanks for coming on Doom Debates.
Thanks, this is great.
Thank you for riding today's Doom train, and thanks to special guest Eli Goldfine for being a model of good discourse conduct. We have now reached our final destination. Before you disembark, this is Conductor Ori reminding you to please take all your belongings and the lessons you learned today, namely that there is a route to a good future, and it does not go through EAC. If you want to move the Overton wind on the tech discourse so that more Eli Goldfines of the world embrace AI pacing by default, remember, there is something you can do. Doom Debates is a viewer-funded program. Your support brings the biggest voices in AI and the public aboard this train so the world can scrutinize their positions and come to realize the merits of AI pause. Without more support, this train faces imminent cancellation. So head over to doomdebates.com/donate and donate if you can. We're nearly 1/3 of the way towards our goal of funding production until the end of the year. On behalf of Liron and the wider Doom Train crew, we look forward to seeing you next time on Doom Debates.